Hey everyone, and welcome back to Slumber Reads. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories, as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes on this one. Dropping a like does help out the channel immensely. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I try to post a video just like this one, roughly every 5 days. This one specifically took me a little while to get out. I won't get into it, life's just been very busy. I'm sure you all understand, I don't need to explain every time I miss an upload. But yeah, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy the 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads, except for the ad break after this intro. There will not be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Log entry 00333-0600-0401-2047. Subject 536,000/740,000. Session 3/4. Impact. A wound in accordance with time will crust relative to the quality of the body it occupies. This attempt to seal a moment of weakness deprives the afflicted of the experience it would otherwise be subjected to. The art of articulation and urgency to calibrate becomes exacerbated by the persistence of natural healing process. For some of us, the drive to perfection and addiction to improvement might also function as an impairment to the quality of natural organisms and their limited means of existence. Rhythmic tonal pings of medical terminals. The sterile white of the fluorescent light swells into my field of sight again, and I am overwhelmed by a sense of lost time. Good morning, my little child. How are you feeling? Did you enjoy the session? Who are you? I ask wearily. The lights fade, and I am swallowed by darkness once again. I retain my consciousness, yet there is another jarring sense of lost connection. My parents decided it was best to send me here for treatment for a number of behaviors I had been exhibiting at home that they found concerning. I had heard this institution is one of the first of its kind, and is on the cutting edge of this type of corrective treatment. I know my parents love me, and I trust them to do what's right. Even though things at home aren't always easy and I am the cause of a lot of conflict. I trust that they know this place is best for me, despite how nervous I am. After all, I just want to grow up to be a normal man and make them happy. After all, it is what nature wants, right? My head is still shaking. I realize I am floating in a big black void. Have I been here before? In a dream? A memory? My body tingles with a warm fuzz, as if all the hair on my body is moving, hypnotically entranced by an electric current. I feel the goose flesh rise, pulsate, and fall as this feeling washes over and through my body. I raise my arms to look, but I can't see them. I try to touch my face in an attempt to gain some orientation, but I realize, despite a sense of motion, I can't physically feel anything. Am I dead? A red light flickers. The rhythm enters rapidly, like the ascendant wings of an insect. Each pulse is accompanied by a feeling of intense emotional swell, fading just as rapidly as it arises from within me. I don't have many words to describe this experience. The best way I can articulate the feeling is as if every aspect of who I am were being sliced into fine layers rapidly before me. Like deli meat. Each layer, following the first, is pulled forward, disjointed from me, and simultaneously removed, falling lost into the infinite blackness in which I find myself. As all the memories and familiar emotions rise and fall within me, I notice a separate, overarching sensation slowly welling up inside myself, a repulsion rising with significant intensity. The disgust in my head crescendos. The emotion becomes more like an intense heat centralized around my head and neck, and a raging fire that trickles down my shoulders and arms into my fingers. The intensity of the pain fully eclipses my thoughts and bodily sensations, and it's as if my body and mind are being actively reduced to cinder. I am unable to move, and my heart trembles. Suddenly I feel myself drop into the darkness. Log entry 00342-536-09-10-2047. Subject 536,000/740,000. Session 4/4. Integration. The measured success of introducing a foreign body transplanted into an organism can be anticipated, in part, by the rate and quality with which the tissue meshes with the surrounding environment. There is a level of expected infection and, hence, a loss of mass in the transplant. However, it is essential that enough of the core elements of the composition of the foreign mass be preserved in order for the lost tissue to regenerate and reintegrate into the whole of the surrounding body. We have curated an approved list of qualifying medications to facilitate this essential preservation of mass, allowing a higher rate of successful integration. Good morning. How did you sleep? A familiar voice chimes. I open my eyes and immediately close them. The rhythmic, metallic chirping of squeaky casters ushers a figure into the room. For some reason, my head is in intense pain, and the bright lights in the room are unbearable. Hello? Who's there? I ask. The figure responds, Don't worry, I won't be long. I just want to take some vitals, then you can go home. The sound of the metallic chirping pivots and stops at the right side of my bed. My head hurts so bad. I groan, and attempt to raise my arm to touch my forehead, realizing my hands are paralyzed, locked to the bed. That's a normal experience. The figure replies. The voice is soft and sweet, with a slightly groggy strain that quivers. I feel like I've heard it before. I am just going to take some readings on your arm. I'll be quick, I promise. The figure mutters, and I feel a gloved finger caress the crook of my right arm. This will be cold, it says, and I feel something small and wet swirl on the inside of my arm. I grimace at the intensity of the feeling, and feel the hair on my skin stand on end. As I feel the small wet thing retract, I realize the pain in my head is beginning to subside. I muster the courage to open my eyes again. I breathe in deeply and see her hunched over me, backlit by a searing white light. I feel like I've seen her before, and feel a sharp sting in the crook of my arm. She and the light swiftly fade. Acquired journal of the subject 00001-undefined 24/12/2043. Subject 536,000/740,000. Christmas Eve. Example of problematic behavior 300/682. Dear Mom and Dad, I am so sorry for all the shame and embarrassment I've caused you these past few years. High school has been difficult for me, and I know it's because of how I look and act around the other kids. I don't know why I stole Mom's lipstick, or tried it on. That was dumb of me, but I wanted to look cool for once. My best friend Kier wears lipstick, and I thought it would maybe help me gain some confidence at school if I was a little more like her. I really feel like no one sees me, and I am so tired. So tired. I feel like something is deeply wrong with me, and I know you can probably guess what it is. I've given a lot of thought to going to that treatment facility Dr. Meng recommended, and I've decided it's the only option for me at this point. Who knows? Maybe I'll meet other kids like me there. Mom, Dad, I love you, and I'm sorry for everything. I promise I want to get better this time. Love, Eric. The piercing, repetitive screech of an alarm rips me from my sleep. My heart is pounding in my chest and my sheets are soaked in sweat. My eyes rise to the ceiling above me, and fixate on the dust-covered fan mounted above my bed. I wonder if that's mold on the blades, think to myself. I guess that would explain the intense nightmares I've been having. I hoist myself up to a sitting position, and my field of vision blurs for a moment, then refocuses on my bookshelf across from my bed. I notice it seems less cluttered than I remember. I hoist myself out of bed, get dressed and showered, and head downstairs for breakfast. The smell of burnt toast and bacon drifted through the kitchen. My mother stood at the stove, unusually tense. She was whistling under her breath. The tune sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. "Morning, Eric," I responded hesitantly. Morning, Mom." She turned and smiled. For just a fraction of a second, her smile evoked a feeling of strangeness inside me. Was the woman beneath those impossibly white lights really my mother? "Good morning, son," my father bellowed from the living room. "You all right, Eric?" my mom asked. Yeah, I'm fine." "You look pale." "I just had a weird dream." She laughed gently. "Well, you're home now." Home? The word felt distant, as if I had lost my connection to what it even meant. But I didn't think much of it. Days passed quickly. Everything seemed smaller and more removed, like I was living in a waking dream. My bedroom, the neighborhood, even my own parents, they kept staring at me with an expression I couldn't place. Maybe it was relief or apprehension. I felt different, but I can't really describe the feeling as good either. I once asked where all my books went, and my parents exchanged glances before answering. Apparently we'd thrown them away before I went into treatment. I felt like they were treating me as if something was wrong, but I couldn't quite place what it was. I guess it came off as odd that I didn't remember where my books had gone. My relationship with my parents was always distant, which I understand will take time to mend. Whenever I forgot conversations from earlier in the day, they insisted I was still recovering from treatment, and that the side effects would resolve over the next few weeks. Yet every morning I woke up exhausted and drenched in sweat. I think something odd might be happening with my short-term memory, but it seems to be getting a little better each day. One morning, I was walking to the bus stop with my father, and he asked how I was feeling after going to treatment. We talked about how excited we were to start fresh, and I apologized for the things I'd done to upset him in the past. I can barely remember the fights that used to break out between us, which honestly was pretty nice. As we walked past the park, I felt strange, a bad feeling inside me, a deep, overwhelming sadness. I felt like I needed to cry, but couldn't. My father grabbed my arm and pointed to a dead squirrel near the oak tree by the bus stop. "Whoa, would you look at that?" he exclaimed. The animal had been ripped into many pieces. Its head, arms, and legs had been torn violently from its torso, which had also been disemboweled. The entrails dressed the protruding stump of the tree. My father muttered, "Raccoons are vicious little guys, huh?" I agreed and chuckled. We might actually be lucky not to have any pets to worry about. I've always wanted a pet, maybe a dog, but I'd also be okay with a cat. I love all sorts of animals, but my parents would never let me get one. They said a pet would mess up the carpets. Later at school, my old friend Kira approached me at lunch. He sat next to me without asking, and I felt odd about this. I normally enjoyed his company very much, but today I just noticed the sickly sweet floral perfume he was wearing, and it was ruining my appetite. Kira always dressed very flamboyantly. Fishnet shirts, crop tops, heavy eye makeup. I used to think he was very stylish, but today I felt embarrassed to be seen with him. Maybe it was the particular vest and fishnet combination he was wearing. I'm not sure. I couldn't really put my finger on it. "Eric, how have you been, Eric? It's great to see you," Kira exclaimed. I've been okay," I muttered. I noticed for the first time The sneering eyes of the people in the lunchroom around us. I could see Jake, the star quarterback of the football team, pointing and jeering with his friends at the table across the room. What were they saying about us? I wondered. I hope they don't think I'm gay or something for sitting next to him. Kier cut into my silence. What's going on? You've been out of school for months and you're barely saying anything. You really seem out of it. I heard you were sick. I was really worried about you. I'm good. I just haven't been getting a lot of sleep lately. Hey, would you mind if I ate alone today? I'm not feeling super great and your perfume is kind of ruining my appetite. Not going to lie. Oh, sorry. Sure. Sorry. I thought you liked Angel. But yeah, I guess that stint in the hospital must have done a number on you. I'll eat lunch in the homeroom today. Hey, I hope you feel better. Eric, I'm really happy you're back. Kier raised his tray, a broken look on his face. Or maybe thinking back on it, it was more concern than anything. As soon as Kier left, I became refreshingly more at ease, and the eyes of the people sitting around us seemed to grow lighter. The fear of being gossiped about immediately left my body. After I got off the bus to go home that day, I noticed another ad for a missing pet. They had been accumulating on the bulletin board near the bus stop ever since I started back at school after my treatment. I would always stop to check whether I could spot any of them around, and maybe even claim some reward money. Wow, people really are careless about letting their animals outside, I thought to myself. If I had a pet, I'd never let it out of my sight. I couldn't shake a funny feeling I got when I looked at these ads. I'd never met any of these pets, but I felt a deep connection to them. I couldn't tell you why, but I felt an overwhelming sadness whenever I thought about them. I figured it must have been because I'd been keeping a passive mental note of what they look like, in case I ever came across one. Like I said, I've always wanted a pet, and I hate seeing animal owners be so careless. A few weeks went by and I had been dreading going to school each day, having to think of new and creative ways to avoid Kier so people would stop gossiping about us. But then one day, while I was gathering my books from my locker to head home, he approached me. Hey Eric, we need to talk. What's up? I asked. I feel really bad and I feel like you're avoiding me. You've been weird ever since you got back from the hospital, and I'm really worried about you. Please tell me what's wrong. Kier is really starting to get to me and he really can't take a hint, can he? I thought to myself, maybe I should just tell him off. Suddenly Jake approached us. Aw, look at the she-male and its boyfriend. Jake sneered. Hey Eric, are you still a cross-dresser? That's why you were in the hospital, right? The she-male was contagious. Kier got in Jake's face and shoved him. Screw off, Kier exclaimed. Jake punched Kier so hard he hit the floor. I saw Kier lying there whimpering, blood starting from his mouth. I swear to God, if you tell anyone about this, I will kill your homo ass. Jake muttered and ran off. Suddenly my vision blurred so badly I thought I was having a stroke. I felt myself fall through the floor and everything went black. The flashing red lights came back and a high-pitched screeching tone filled my head as I floated in the darkness. I remember this place. I've been here before. He's waking up. Perfect. Read him his rights. You have the right to remain. You have the right. You have the right to it. My head was killing me, and I slowly opened my eyes. The fluorescent light illuminated the blurry figures across from me, and slowly they came into focus, their gruff, disembodied voices muttering to each other. I realized I was sitting upright and couldn't move my arms or legs. I blinked and my vision cleared. I was in a small white room, at a table across from 3 police officers. Son, can you hear me? One of them demanded. What's going on? Where am I? How did I muttered groggily. You know you're going to be charged as an adult. What you did is disgusting. Now answer the question. The officer shouted. What question? I stammered. Do you recognize her? The officer shoved a picture of Kier in my face. Well, what used to be Kier. Yeah, I stammered. I think I've seen that squirrel before. Log entry 00345-620 11-12-2047. Subject 536,000/740,000. Eric. Abstract. Corrective identity integration successful. Contradictions and side effects. Subject presents non-union integration via extreme violence. Revisions needed. Dr. Meng, PhD. I don't even know where to start, but I need advice right now because I feel like I am completely losing my mind. I'm watching Mark sleep on the baby monitor while I type this. For 3 long years, my life has been reduced to the 4 walls of this room. Mark used to be a 6'2" construction foreman, but a drunk driver changed all of that in a fraction of a second. Now he's just a silent, uncooperative weight. Paralyzed from the neck down. He can't feed himself, he can't hold my hand. He can't even roll over to stop the bed sores unless I, physically, haul his heavy body onto his side. My wrists ache constantly. My back is completely ruined. Being a full-time caregiver is a special kind of hell, but I do it because I love him. Every single morning is identical. 6 a.m., the sharp, metallic buzz of my phone alarm goes off, shocking the soles of my feet against the cold hardwood floor. I force down 4 cups of lukewarm, bitter black coffee just to function. When I walk into his bedroom, the air always hits me like a wall. Heavy, humid, smelling of old sweat, sour skin, and wool blankets. The smell of bleach never truly leaves this house, but it can't cover up the scent of sickness. I roll him over, listening to the sickening, wet slide of his skin against the plastic undersheets. His joints give a dull, hollow pop with every shift. Then comes the kitchen routine. The dry, grating screech of the mortar and pestle sets my teeth on edge as I grind his pills into a fine, chalky powder. Muscle relaxants, nerve blockers, and a heavy, liquid sedative to stop his involuntary spasms. I mix it into a thick, grayish-beige nutrient slurry that smells faintly of metallic vitamins, adding the clear, viscous drops of the sedative until it dissolves. I spoon-feed him slowly, the metal clicking sharply against his teeth, using a rough washcloth to wipe away the sticky string of drool on his stubble. Usually his eyes are dead. He just stares blankly at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. But over the last 2 weeks, something shifted. The moment the door hinges give a tiny rusted squeak. Mark's eyes instantly snap to mine. They aren't blank anymore. They are wide, bloodshot, and frantic. The pupils dilate so violently they swallow his irises. Yesterday, when I brought the spoon to his lips, a single hot tear sliced through the grease on his cheek. His jaw locked tightly shut with a sickening click of bone. I had to pinch his nose and pry his mouth open, breathing in the sour tang of his breath, just to make sure he swallowed his medicine. I told his doctor, but she thinks it's just late-onset depression and medical trauma. I don't think so. The house feels wrong. Yesterday, I found a damp patch of the hallway carpet that smelled like rain. Last night, I heard a floorboard groan in the living room while I was bathing him. But at 3:15 a.m. last night, things got so much worse. A sound woke me up that scraped right along my spine. It was a rhythmic, dull thudding coming from his room. Thump, 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 like a heavy sack of flour being dropped on the floorboards. I grabbed my heavy iron flashlight, the cold metal freezing my palms, and crept down the pitch-black hallway. I pushed his bedroom door open, the rusted hinges giving a high, piercing whine. The room was freezing. The window was shut, but the air felt dead and hollow. Mark was asleep, his chest rising and falling in the slow, mechanical rhythm of the sedative. But his phone, the old, deactivated smartphone I keep on his nightstand, just to play ambient rain sounds to drown out the click hiss of his oxygen machine, was lying on the floor. It was 3 feet away from the table, face down on the hardwood, its screen shattered into a spiderweb of glinting, sharp fractures. There is no draft in this house strong enough to blow a heavy phone off a nightstand, and Mark physically cannot move. I didn't go back to sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the gray dawn bleed into the room until the shadows on the linoleum dissolved. My mind kept looping back to the shattered glass. I tried to build a rational explanation. Piece by piece, the way you try to balance an unstable house of cards. Maybe the vibration of the rain app had slowly drifted the phone to the edge. Maybe a stray mouse. But deep down in that quiet, visceral place where your instincts live, I knew that was a lie. The phone had been placed in the exact center of the oak nightstand, nestled in a carved groove. It hadn't drifted, it had been pushed. At 7 a.m. I walked back into Mark's room, my slippers dragging heavily. He was still under the deep, suffocating fog of the emergency sedative. His breath came in thin, whistling gasps that rattled the back of his throat, a dry, papery sound that always reminded me of dead leaves scraping against asphalt. His skin looked translucent in the morning light, mapped with thin, branching rivers of blue and purple veins. I stood over him for a long time, the heavy iron flashlight still gripped tightly in my right hand. My knuckles were white. "Did you do it?" I whispered into the quiet room. The only response was the mechanical, rhythmic click hiss of the oxygen machine. I felt a sudden, sickening wave of shame wash over me. How could I even think that? The man hadn't felt his own toes in 36 months. His spine was a shattered mess of scar tissue and wire. I was letting the sleep deprivation eat holes in my sanity. I set the flashlight down with a heavy, metallic thunk and went to work. His right hand was still stained with the dried, dark brown crust of the blood from yesterday's frantic scraping. I fetched a plastic basin of warm water and a soft yellow sponge. When I dipped his hand into the water, the liquid instantly swirled with a rusty amber tint. I worked gently, dabbing at the raw, weeping skin over his knuckles. His fingers were stiff, curled inward like the claws of a dead bird. As I wiped away the last of the crust, my fingers brushed against the pad of his index finger. The skin there wasn't soft, like the rest of his unused, bedbound body. It was rough. There was a tiny localized patch of hard, callous skin right at the tip, the kind you get from repetitive, friction-heavy pressure, like someone rubbing their finger against a coarse surface for hours at a time. My heart gave a hard, erratic thud against my ribs. I dropped the sponge back into the basin. It hit the surface with a loud, wet splash, slopping soapy, pinkish water over the rim and onto the hardwood floor. I stared at his face. His eyelids gave a sudden, violent twitch, his chest heaving as the medication began to lose its grip on his nervous system. "Mark?" I breathed, leaping down until the sour heat of his breath fanned against my cheek. His eyes snapped open. There was no gradual waking up, no soft blinking away of sleep. It was an instantaneous electric jolt. The pupils were already fully dilated, pitch-black pools that seemed to swallow the gray morning light. He didn't look at the ceiling fan. He didn't look at the window. He looked directly into my eyes, and the sheer, unadulterated hatred burning in his gaze froze the blood in my veins. His jaw began to work. his lips stretching back over his dry, yellowing teeth with a faint, wet, tearing sound. A thick line of white, foamy saliva bubbled at the corner of his mouth. He was trying to form a word. His throat clicked, a dry, raspy rattle vibrating deep in his neck. He wheezed. The sound MCF quiet, barely louder than the rustle of paper. I leaned closer, my ear inches from his lips, entirely forgetting my fear in a sudden, desperate surge of hope. "What is it, sweetheart? Tell me. What do you need?" "Why?" He stopped, a violent, full-body shudder ripping through his frame. His heels dug into the mattress under the heavy wool blankets, a sudden, frantic kicking motion that lasted 2 terrible seconds before his legs went entirely limp again. His chest heaved as he fought for air, his teeth snapping shut with a sharp, sickening crack that echoed in the small room. He didn't finish the word, but he didn't need to. I backed away from the bed, my hands pressed hard against my mouth to stifle a sob. The sheer, feral panic in his eyes wasn't the look of a man suffering from depression. It was the look of a prey animal staring at the thing that was going to eat it. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of the house, just for an hour, to clear the fog out of my brain and breathe air that didn't smell like sickness and bleach. "I'm going to the store, Mark," I said, my voice sounding hollow and fake even to my own ears. "I'm going to get some more of your liquid formula. I'll be right back." He didn't blink. He just watched me move toward the door, his eyes tracking my every step with a cold, unblinking intensity that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I grabbed my car keys from the kitchen counter, the metal jingling loudly in the quiet room. I walked out the front door, slamming it shut behind me, and locked it with a heavy, definitive click. I walked down the porch steps, my boots crunching loudly on the gravel driveway, and got into my sedan. I started the engine, letting the loud mechanical rumble fill the quiet suburban air. But I didn't put the car in drive. Instead, I sat there, watching the exhaust smoke curl up into the cold morning air in my rearview mirror. A terrible dark thought had taken root in my mind, a poisonous little seed that I couldn't tear out. He thinks I'm gone. I turned off the ignition. The sudden silence wrapped around the car like a heavy blanket. I got out quietly, closing the car door, using only the tip of my finger until the latch clicked shut without a sound. I crept back up the wooden porch steps, avoiding the third step because I knew it gave a loud, structural groan when weight was applied. I unlocked the front door with agonizing slowness, turning the key millimeter by millimeter until the bolt slid back without a whisper. I stepped inside the hallway. The house felt entirely different now, heavy, expectant, and freezing cold. I took off my boots, standing in my wool socks, and began to creep down the dark hallway toward Mark's room, my heart hammering so violently against my ribs, I was certain he would hear it. I reached the edge of his doorframe. The door was cracked open just an inch, a sliver of gray light cutting across the dark hardwood of the hall. I leaned forward, pressing my eye to the gap. Through that narrow, 1-inch gap in the doorway, the world seemed to shrink down to the sharp, mechanical click hiss of the oxygen concentrator. I held my breath, the back of my throat burning with the taste of copper and swallowed panic. At first, nothing happened. Mark lay perfectly still under the heavy, dark wool blanket. The room was a tableau of static, gray misery. Then the blanket shifted. It wasn't a sudden jerk or a violent spasm. It was a slow, agonizingly deliberate swell, like something buried alive trying to reshape its shroud. From beneath the edge of the fabric, his right arm began to emerge. My breath caught in my teeth. The movement was horrific because of how much effort it took. The muscles in his forearm were completely wasted away, the skin hanging loose and gray against the bone. But it was lifting. It rose millimeter by millimeter, trembling so violently that I could hear the dry friction of his skin dragging against the plastic undersheet. It sounded like paper tearing in slow motion. His hand rose into the cold air of the bedroom. His fingers, those stiff, yellowed claws with the raw, calloused index pad, were flexing. They opened and closed, tasting the air, before reaching out toward the side of the mattress. He wasn't reaching for the shattered phone on the floor. He was reaching down, forcing his arm over the sharp edge of the wooden bed frame, his knuckles scraping against the grain until a fresh bead of dark blood welled up on his skin. He didn't even flinch. His face, visible in the sliver of gray light, was a mask of pure, agonizing concentration. His teeth were bared, stringy strings of saliva stretching between his lips as his fingers dug blindly into the narrow gap between the heavy box spring and the mattress. He was searching for something. I couldn't look anymore. The reality of what I was seeing smashed through my brain like a physical blow. He wasn't paralyzed. Not completely. He had been gaining movement back, practicing in the dark hours while I slept. Hiding it from the doctors, hiding it from me. I pushed the door open. The rusted hinges didn't just squeak. They let out a sharp, metallic scream that pierced the quiet of the house. Mark's reaction was instantaneous. The sheer electric terror that flooded his face matched my own. His arm dropped like a stone, slamming against the wooden frame before disappearing beneath the blanket. He closed his eyes tightly, forcing his breathing to go shallow and ragged, trying to mimic the heavy, dead weight of the sedative. But it was too late. The illusion was shattered. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. A strange, freezing calm washed over me, the kind of numbness that comes when you're in a car crash and everything slows down to a crawl. I walked into the room, my wool socks making no sound on the floorboards. Mark lay there, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in a fake, rhythmic pattern. But he was trembling. The wool blanket was vibrating with the frantic beat of his heart. I stopped at the edge of the bed. I leaned down, my face inches from his, and whispered, "I saw you, Mark." His eyes snapped open. The pretense was gone. The raw, feral hatred was back, but beneath it was a desperate, whimpering panic. I reached down to the exact spot where his fingers had been clawing. I shoved my way into the dark, tight space between the mattress and the box spring. My knuckles brushed against something cold and smooth. Plastic. I pulled it out. It was a cheap, black burner smartphone. The kind you buy at a gas station for $20. The screen was smudged with oily fingerprints and the faint, red smear of his own blood from his raw knuckles. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped it. I pressed the power button. The screen illuminated the dim room with a harsh blue glare. There were no apps installed, no games, no social media. There was only the messaging interface. I opened the drafts folder, my thumb hovering over the glass. There were dozens of them, dozens of messages, all addressed to emergency services, written over the span of months. They were typed in frantic, messy blocks of text, full of typos and missing spaces where his calloused, uncooperative finger had missed the keys. I started reading them, the words blurring before my eyes as the cold truth finally settled into my chest. I stared at the glowing blue screen, my thumb scrolling through the drafts. My mind couldn't make sense of the words at first. They looked like code. They looked like a language I didn't speak. The oldest draft was from 6 months ago. "Help me. I'm not sick anymore. My legs work. She won't let me out of the room." I blinked. The text blurred. I scrolled to the next one, dated 3 months later. Tried to walk to the kitchen last night to get water. She woke up. She screamed at me like I was a ghost. She hit me with a flashlight and forced the syringe into my mouth. "Please, someone check the house on Elm Street. I am a prisoner." My breath hitched. The words felt heavy, like lead pressing down on my chest. Elm Street. We didn't live on Elm Street. We lived in our beautiful, quiet suburban home. I looked up at Mark. He was staring at me, his eyes wide and leaking silent tears into his stubble. His jaw wasn't locked in a medical spasm. It was trembling with sheer, unadulterated terror. I looked back down at the phone. The most recent draft was from last night, typed right before he dropped the device onto the floorboards. She thinks it's 3 years ago. She thinks the accident just happened. The doctor told her last year that my spine healed, but her brain snapped from the stress. Every time I try to stand up, she thinks an intruder is breaking in. She drugs me back into the paralysis. If I don't get out today, the sedatives are going to stop my heart. Please. The phone slipped from my hand. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp plastic clatter, the screen flickering once before going dark. The click hiss of the oxygen concentrator suddenly sounded incredibly loud, echoing in the corners of the room. I looked around. The walls weren't white anymore. They were covered in layers of peeling, yellowed wallpaper. The medical equipment in the corner was dusty, unplugged, and rusted. I looked down at my hands. They were stained with the gray, chalky residue of the pills I ground up every single morning. The mortar and pestle sat on the nightstand, surrounded by dozens of empty prescription bottles with Mark's name on them, all prescribed over a year ago, all expired. "Mark," I whispered, my voice sounding incredibly small, like a little girl lost in a dark forest. "Sweetheart, your breakfast is getting cold." He didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyelids were already fluttering, drifting shut as the massive emergency dose of the sedative I had forced down his throat minutes ago finally took hold of his central nervous system. His wasted arm, the one he had worked so hard for months to rehabilitate in the dark, slipped off the mattress and hung limply toward the floor, his calloused index finger brushing the wood. I stood there in the freezing room for a long time watching his chest rise and fall. Rise, fall, rise, fall. Slow, rhythmic, completely safe. A wave of intense, beautiful relief washed over me, clearing away all the panic and the paranoia of the last 2 weeks. The house felt quiet again. The stalker was gone. The intruder hadn't broken in after all. Mark was right here, right where he belonged, entirely safe under the heavy wool blankets where nothing could ever hurt him again. I walked out of the room, closing the door until the rusted hinges gave a soft, familiar squeak. I headed down the hall to the kitchen to start a fresh pot of coffee. It's almost 6 a.m. and I need to be ready. Tomorrow is a big day. I have to wake up early to take care of my husband. I've been a teacher for years now. It's some kind of unspoken rule that every year, there will always be a kid that is weird. The level and variety of weirdness vary, from benign to outright dangerous. My first year as a teacher, we had a student bring a Stanley cup filled with gasoline that he poured in the boys' bathroom toilets, and set them on fire. His reasoning? The bathrooms always smelled bad, and if the toilets were gone, they would have to remodel the whole thing. And he wasn't wrong about either of those things. He did get expelled, though, and avoided jail through what I assume was a very expensive lawyer. After that, we banned water that wasn't in clear bottles. My second year was a girl who had an odd obsession with breaking into lockers and leaving rocks inside them. The third year, we had a boy who would walk up behind people and scream into their ears when they weren't expecting it. He got punched a lot before his parents found him a good therapist. Then in my fourth year, I had a new student, Simon Lynch, who all the incoming freshmen agreed was weird. But so far, he is relatively benign. He also had some of the best grades in the school. He's helpful and kind, and even has a small group of friends he hangs out with. In class, he's an angel. The weirdness comes from the fact that he keeps talking about the god in the corner. He mentioned it in passing even to me. He talks about this god so nonchalantly that you can almost dismiss it, like it's something he saw in a movie or read about in a book. I don't think anyone gave it any mind when he started talking about it. But the thing is, he never stopped talking about it. When there was a test, he would remind the other students in the class that if they made an offering to the god in the corner, they'd pass with flying colors. And apparently the power of this god didn't stop at getting good grades. It helped with passing your driver's test, for helping you get rid of acne and lose weight and heal your dog's seizures. Nothing was too big or too small for the god in the corner. It was getting annoying, and I'd have to intervene and remind him that the classroom wasn't a good place for religious talk. It's alright, Miss Gwyn. It's not a religion, more like a cosmic force. I don't think you can actually pray to the god in the corner. Just give it things, he said with a small smile. After that, the talk of the god went quiet. There weren't any tests coming up. Then Shannon Berber came in one day, whispering to the other students that the god in the corner was real. And even better, it worked. Shannon had always had thick glasses. She was actually legally blind, and her eyesight was predicted to only get worse. But she had listened to Simon, and faced with nothing to lose, she made an offering to the god, and it hadn't even been a lot. Apparently, the god was satisfied with whatever you gave it, as long as it was sincere and something that meant something to you. It didn't want blood or your firstborn or anything so cliché. Shannon had made it a pie, a gooseberry pie, and a framed canvas of her own artwork. It had been a watercolor she'd made in class and been particularly proud of. She had placed these things in the corner, called the god and gave it her wish, and the offerings had been taken, and her eyes had been fixed that night. It was a miracle, for lack of a better word. I had never seen Shannon so happy. Her eyes were large and lovely, a clear hazel green that I had never even been able to properly see. After that, talk of the god in the corner became more commonplace. One of the worst students in my class, Maxwell Hardy, suddenly started getting straight A's. Another girl, Emily Stillway, got a full-ride scholarship to her dream school. For some other students, they grew taller, got thinner, had better skin. Some even developed athletic abilities seemingly overnight. It was weird, and surely it was all a coincidence. It had to be. And then my boyfriend Kyle got in a car wreck. He had been driving home when another driver who was too busy texting to drive properly T-boned him at an intersection. He was lucky to be alive at all, but he was in a coma, and there was no hope of him waking up, or him even living past the end of the week. I called Simon that evening. We're not supposed to call students, but I knew where to find his personal information, and I called his cell. My heart was pounding as I dialed the numbers. "Hello?" Simon asked from the other end of the line. "Simon, it's Miss Gwyn, your teacher from school," I stammered out. "I know your voice, Miss Gwyn. I think I know why you're calling. I heard about your boyfriend. Do you want to know how to make an offering to the god in the corner?" he asked with certainty. "Yes," was all I said back. "It's easy, Miss Gwyn. All you need is a corner somewhere in your house, or any building will do. It must be dark. There must be a shadow, just enough that you can't see the corner anymore. And then you give it something. Something that's personal to you. Something that's of sentimental value. Or something you made. Even a pie will do. Did you know Ryan Blair sang a song to the god in the corner? Something he wrote himself, and now he's the best player on the basketball team," Simon said conversationally. "What do I say? What do I say to get the god to come?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You say out loud, 'This is an offering to the god in the corner.' Then you say what your wish is. And then the god takes the offering and it's all over. Oh, the most important part. Don't try to take a photo of the god or record it in any way. Or turn on the light and reveal what's in the corner. There are consequences to that, you know. Simon explained. What happens if I do that? I asked, fear creeping into my voice. Well, my uncle did that once. We never saw him again. I think he might still be alive, but honestly, isn't that scarier than being dead? The dead don't suffer. Simon said so matter-of-factly that it sent a shiver down my spine. Thank you, Simon. That's all I needed to know, I said in a rush. You're welcome, Miss Quinn. I'll see you in class, Simon said, then ended the call. I sat there for a few minutes, genuinely contemplating what I was thinking of doing. I'd already crossed a line by calling a student like I did just now. Was I really this desperate to try to give an offering to some kind of god that lived in a corner? I was. I couldn't lose my Kyle if there was even a slim possibility of saving him. But I had no idea what to offer up. I was not an artist or a musician. I could barely cook, and I wasn't sure if the god in the corner would be satisfied with scrambled eggs and mac and cheese. Then it hit me. I did have something to offer it, something of great sentimental value. I dropped to my knees and reached under the bed, pulled out a lockbox that held the few valuables I owned, plus important documents. I opened it and pulled out an old wristwatch. It was my father's watch, and it had been my grandfather's watch before that. My dad had died when I was a teenager, and one of the few things that he had passed down to me. It was too sentimental for me to wear on a daily basis, but I would take it out occasionally to hold it and think of my dad. My heart dropped as I held it. It really was the item I treasured most in the world, but I would give it up if it meant saving someone that I loved. I looked up and locked my eyes with the corner of the bedroom farthest from the bed. The light always had a hard time reaching it. I stood up and quickly switched the ceiling light off. It plunged half the room into near darkness, and the corner itself was now completely black. I edged closer to the corner, feeling a mix of fear and hopeful anxiety. I lay the watch down at the edge of the shadow. I swallowed hard and started to speak. This is an offering to the god in the corner. Please heal my boyfriend Kyle, and make him as healthy and whole as he was before the accident, I said timidly. A few seconds passed, and lots of conflicting emotions raced through my brain. Did I need to speak louder? Maybe the offering wasn't good enough, or the more likely explanation was that this was all insane, and my student had played a vile joke on me when I wasn't in my right mind. And then the shadows shifted. I gasped, falling backwards so I was flat on my backside. Two arms emerged from the shadows. A scream caught in my throat and I clasped my hand over my mouth. The arms were long, far longer than a person's arms could possibly be. The flesh was a dark ashen gray, not black. The hands were long and the fingers delicate, almost feminine. Short, dark fingernails that glimmered sharply in the dim light caught my eye. The hands moved slowly and purposefully. They plucked the watch up and turned it to the shadow, as if a face I couldn't see was taking stock of the offering. I heard a faint murmur, a whisper that sounded pleased, and then the arms, hands, and the watch retracted into the shadows like a rock disappearing into a lake after it's thrown in. I screamed then, a small, pathetic sound as I ran from the room. I stood shaking in my living room as I tried to process what I had just seen, what I had just done. I didn't go back into the bedroom that night. I didn't need to. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, probably no more than 20 minutes, when my phone rang. It was Kyle's mom. Maddie, you need to come to the hospital right now." His mom practically screamed over the phone. "Oh God, what's happened? Is Kyle dead?" I sobbed, fearing the answer. No, he's awake and he's okay and he's asking for you," she shouted back. Kyle was healed. It was nothing short of a miracle. Kyle was being held as a medical marvel, and the doctors promised that studies would be done on him in the future. I took him home a few days later. He was the same old Kyle, though he did tease me now about why I wanted the lights on in the bedroom, and why I always stared at corners now. We got engaged not long afterwards and married. We even started our own family. Simon continued to be a good student. He graduated from high school as a valedictorian and got a full scholarship to a very prestigious university. Even that was years ago, and I see Simon's name on the news now. He started a new tech company that people are saying will be the next Tesla. In the photos I've seen him, he looks handsome and self-assured. And it always leaves me wondering, what is the extent of the power of the god in the corner? One weekend back in October, I took a spontaneous road trip with some friends up to Fort Collins, Colorado. Both I and my closest friend David are originally from there, so when I found out he and a few others were taking a spur-of-the-minute trip up to go see some old friends at CSU, I couldn't possibly stay behind. I was getting homesick, and the same old sights around Albuquerque were getting pretty stale. The catch, however, was that I would have to take my own ride since David's car, once you counted all the people plus luggage, was pretty well at capacity. That's what happens when you're the last to find out about stuff, I guess. Oh well, it was fine. I never minded long road trips on my own. I had been previously advised by my therapist to avoid doing things like driving on my own for more than 4 hours. But I felt that if one of my favorite places in the world was at the end of it all, I could get through it just fine. Besides, I was starting to feel rather stable again. It was a long drive up, but definitely worth the travel. We got to catch up with some of our old friends, smoke a little weed, and mess around downtown for a while. Our buddy Eli, who we had both known since the 3rd grade, was cool with letting us all crash at he and his roommate's house for the couple nights we were there, so nobody had to fret about spending money on a hotel. That final morning, David and everyone else started driving back to New Mexico early when I decided to take advantage of having my own car to sleep in and go grab pizza with Eli. At about 1 that afternoon, I finally made my getaway. I knew I was kinda dragging my butt a bit, but I always liked taking in every moment that I could get. Besides, it's not like I was in a huge rush to get back to Albuquerque, even if I did have class the next day. Thanks for coming up, dude. It was cool getting to hang out again, Eli said, pulling me in for a hug. He patted me on the back. Hey, text me when you get back to ABQ. It's bonkers to be driving across all that desert by yourself. No worries, man, I assured him. I made it here. I'll make it back. He smiled, we fist bumped, and I was on my way. My first order of business before leaving FC. Getting a hold of some solid caffeine. The first few hours were a breeze. I expected I-25 to be awful through Denver, but it was surprisingly mellow. It was about the same on through Colorado Springs. But then around Pueblo is where things got dicey. The monster I'd bought back in Fort Collins was inconveniently kicking in full force by then. I was starting to get antsy. Probably would have been better off if I went without it. It was at about this point where things started to get very strange. Like my head had gone numb, and time around me was starting to slow. Things were getting very spinny. Dehydrated, I figured. The next time I stopped for gas, it probably wouldn't be a terrible idea to get some water. Just breathe and keep it together until then. Traffic was backed up for miles. Just up the road there had been a pileup caused by some sort of collision heading south. From what I could make out, it was a horrendous one as well. As I made it past the wreckage, I could see that a semi had slammed into somebody's car at around 75 miles per hour. There was hardly anything left of the car. Same likely went for its driver. Scrap metal and shattered glass littered the shoulder of the interstate. I felt eerily light, and rather sick staring at what little remained of the car. Think the caffeine was starting to give me a severe case of the jitters. Even as I passed the wreckage by about a mile, my eyes kept obsessively glancing into the rearview mirror until the scene was far out of sight. The nervous cracks were definitely beginning to form. Night came almost instantly after I'd gone through Trinidad. Seemed as if time had completely bypassed the twilight hour. Just one moment, the sun was hanging over the mountains, then the next, it had gone black. State line wouldn't be far now. Then only about 5 hours left on the road, I was estimating. Thank God, I thought. This trek back was wearing on me a lot more than I had expected. My eyes drifted over to the fuel gauge. Little less than a quarter of a tank. Crap, I had completely spaced that. I was starting to panic and consider my options. Do I just swing back to Trinidad? No, I gotta get home. No time to waste turning around. The next town won't be far. It wouldn't be for another 15 miles before I saw the yellowy lighting on the billboard. Cheap gas, great snacks. World's best jerky. Swing on in and fill her up. At Driscoll's Service Station. Exit 1B. Pigeon Ditch, New Mexico. Pigeon Ditch, huh? Like a name that would stand out to me, but I had zero recollection of it from the drive up. Who the hell was elected to name that town? I thought to myself. The hell with it. The place could be named anything for all I cared. I just needed some gas. It's not like any better option was going to present itself. I took the exit onto the cracked and eroded asphalt. Relief starting to set in. By the time I pulled into town, it was close to midnight. It looked like something straight out of the Andy Griffith Show. Very pristine 1950s type architecture. It was all kept up very nicely. Not hardly any rot, grime, or wear on any of the buildings. It was a really interesting and charming little town, but there was one thing about it that struck me as a little strange. Not a single car on the street. None even parked in the driveways. It was just still. Lifeless. I started figuring the town was probably just made up of old folks who'd rather not bother with vehicle ownership anymore. A pathetic attempt at rationalization. After a while, I had finally found the Driscoll's station. 50 cents for regular, 75 cents for unleaded. Wow, when they said cheap, they weren't kidding. I said to myself, how could that even be possible in this century? I pulled up to the pump and hopped out, pulling my wallet from my back pocket. As I drew out my credit card, the sound of thunder echoed in the distance. I turned to see a massive surge of thunderheads accumulating over the mountains, an electric purple sheet of lightning pulsating through them. Great, I thought. Of course it would storm on me. I slipped my credit card into the slot and waited. The screen read, "Card read error. Please see attendant." All of my hopefulness dropped in a millisecond. I turned to look at the convenience store. Pitch black. Of course it would be. It was midnight in the middle of nowhere. Okay, probably just a bad read, I thought. Just try it again. Card read error. Please see attendant. Crap, I said aloud. The thunder bounded across the sky, closer this time. I tried another card. This time my debit. I slid it into the slot and prayed it went through. All to no avail. Card read error. Please see attendant. Crap, I exclaimed through my teeth. I wadded up my fist and smacked the machine. I attempted to talk myself down. Okay. Just chill. We're good. Let's just try the other pumps. I did so. Every single pump, using each card. No luck. My heart started beating 100 miles a minute. My car was on fumes at this point. I wondered, do I dare seek out another gas station in town? Besides sleeping in my car and waiting for an attendant to show up at the crack of dawn, what other choice do I have? Thunder cracked. The storm grew closer. I got in the Taurus and started to navigate towards Main Street. The further I went in, the more unnerved I got. The place was an absolute ghost town. Sure, it was past midnight, but there had to be somebody out doing something somewhere. No drunks at the bars, no vagrants sleeping on the park benches, no pimply-faced teenagers getting off their late-night shift. Just what the hell is going on with this place? Down at the far end of the street, I saw my salvation at last. Dimly lit, but still my final hope, sat another Driscoll station. Clearly, whoever the Driscolls were, they had really cornered the market on service stations in this town. I pulled in and drove up to one of the pumps. The wind was picking up, the intense purple flashes of light coursing through the sky. I eyed the machine for what felt like several minutes before finally taking out my card. I inserted it into the slot and waited. The machine thought. It beeped, then paused for a few minutes. The verdict? Card read error. Please see attendant. I lost it. I cried out. I screamed and I kicked and punched at the diabolical piece of crap metal and plastic rectangle that was making my life needlessly hard. The wind howled over me, and the large crack of thunder was deafening. I just want to go home, I shouted. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing. That's all I want, is to go home. I knelt there crying and cursing for a good solid 20 minutes. I expected someone to call in a noise complaint eventually, but no cop, nor anyone for that matter, came to check on me. The storm had picked up and raged on. When my eyes had finally dried and crusted over from the excess tears, I looked over to see a diner completely lit from the inside. Was that like that when I got here? I wondered. Maybe my focus was so honed in on the gas station that I hadn't even noticed. I got to my feet and walked over to it. No sense in moving the car. I pushed the door open and looked around. Not a soul to be seen or heard. Shocker. Nevertheless, it was still a welcome refuge from the weather. For some odd reason, they were playing some sort of piano music on the speakers, like ragtime or something similar. Weird choice given the whole 50s aesthetic, but nothing too unusual, I guess. I looked at the hostess stand. A sign read in delicately hand-painted text. Please seat yourself. I looked up to see back into the kitchen. Nope, no one. Not a clang of a skillet or sizzling of a fryer. Only sound to be heard was the bubbling of a fresh pot of coffee and the tinny emitting of plink, plink, plink. Well, I thought. Might as well go and sit down. I thought I'd only been sitting for about 5 minutes when I looked back and the clock said it was already 3 a.m. I sank in my seat. I could have been asleep in my dorm by now. I was thinking. From the corner of my eye, I detected some new shape. A dark shape. I tilted my head a bit further to see what my peripheries were sensing. It was a man hunched over at the counter with his back to me. A weathered black bomber jacket was draped over his scrawny frame. A filthy trucker hat perched crookedly on top of his head. I heard no one come in, not a sound aside from the coffee pot or the faint music. How long had he been sitting there? Christ, you'd think I would have been excited to finally see another human being in this place. But his stillness deeply unnerved me. Then, with a knowing sense, he turned to me with cold yet placid eyes. His face was long, leathery, and gaunt. His large, beak-like nose cast a triangular shadow over his glassy left eye. For a while there was nothing. He just stared at me, and I back at him. At last he offered me a nod. I forced a crooked smile and nodded back. Not quite knowing how to follow it up, I glanced around the place and said, "Guess it's a little slow tonight, huh?" I wheezed a weak and awkward laugh. He stared at me for a moment longer, shrugged, and then turned back around. Well, that was at least an attempt at conversation. I was still too shaken up to be discouraged by a little cold shoulder from this stranger. I turned back in my seat as well and stared out into the blackness. Every now and again, I'd feel compelled to stare at the man's reflection in the window, looking like an oil painting. And then, there was just me in the midground. tired, strung out, and helpless. The longer I stared at myself, the more entrenched I got in my own thoughts. Is this me now? Will help ever come? Will I ever see my family or friends ever again? Am I gonna die here? Will this weird little town be my final memory? Just then it occurred to me, I'll just call David and he could come up to get me. It'd be a pain in the butt for him to drive up all the way from Albuquerque, and he'd most likely be a little annoyed, but once he understood the situation, surely he would understand. I dug out my phone and started to call him. Of course, he would definitely be asleep by now, but if I left him a message, he would certainly respond the moment he heard it. I sat with the phone pressed up against my face, waiting for anything. There wasn't even a dial tone, just the fizzing and cracking of static, like the quiet from an old record player. I looked at my phone. David's name was displayed along with the phone's empty promise, calling underneath it. I held it back up to my ear, and for literally any sound, there was none. I clenched my eyes in panic and frustration. I tried to breathe through it, one shaky breath in, one shaky breath out, and repeat. When I opened my eyes, I looked to the window. There I was in my booth trying to make a call. There the man was, standing, facing me, closer. Jesus Christ, he was right next to me. I jolted and turned to face him, the shock sending my whole body cold for the flash of a moment. I dropped my phone and bounced off the seat and onto the floor beneath the table. The man didn't budge at all. He just stared down at me. He held one cup of coffee in each of his white, veiny hands. He shook his head as he sat one of the cups in front of me. "Those never work too well out here," he croaked. He took his cup and sat down opposite of me. I stared at him pinned back in my seat, still reeling with shock. I stared down at the coffee he'd just given me. "Thanks, man, but I think I've had plenty of caffeine." "I figured," he said. "That's why it's decaf. It's always nice to have a strong, warm drink to ease your nerves." I looked down at it, still showing leeriness. No way in hell was I going to drink whatever this random guy just gave me. He raised his hand. "But you won't hurt my feelings none if you decide you won't take it." He gave me a weary smile and took a sip of his own. He squinted at me with his sagely eyes. "Seems like you're having a rather difficult night, my friend." I uttered a dry laugh. "Yeah, sure. Something like that." "I'm sorry to hear that." He reached into his jacket. My defensive nerves kicked in and I shifted in my seat. He looked at me, at first puzzled, then amused. He had a plastic packet of something half drawn from his pocket. "Just wanted to see if you'd like a little jerky. Best in the world." He snickered. He took out a generous piece and offered it to me. I eyeballed it, uncertain. He nodded and broke off half from the same piece. "Here, I'll eat mine first if that makes you feel better." He popped his half in his mouth and chewed it, grinning. Best in the world. I watched then, finally obliged him, taking the other half. I held it part way to my mouth, still hesitant. I sighed and finally ate it. He nodded. "Good, ain't it?" To my surprise, it actually was. It tasted savory and tender, unlike any sort of jerky, or really anything I've had before. "That is good," I proclaimed. "Very good. Where did you get this stuff?" He jerked his thumb back behind him, towards the Driscoll station. "The billboards don't lie, son," he said, smirking. I pondered for a moment, then I remembered. No, I guess not. What's with the Driscolls here, by the way? I don't think I've ever seen one anywhere else. He shook his head. "You wouldn't. They're strictly local." "Oh," I said, growing a bit more uncomfortable with this stranger. "Any particular reason why they don't like credit cards?" He stared at me again. He then looked down at the table as if searching for a good answer. He sighed. "I'm sorry, brother. I'm afraid I'm pretty new to all this business, or whatever you'd want to call it. I raised my brow at him. What do you mean? Well, he sighed. Gotta think of a delicate way to put this. See, I was sent to help you get out of here, and where you need to be. I frowned. What the hell was he talking about? Who sent him? AAA? I don't understand. You're saying you are here to help me get back to Albuquerque? He hung his head. That's what I was afraid of. You don't know what's going on here, do you? I was starting to feel severely unnerved again. My heart started thumping in my chest so hard it felt like it was bouncing off my rib cage. I just stared back at him, waiting for an elaboration. Alright, he said. Now before I tell you this, I want you to take about 3 good deep breaths because this is going to be a bit overwhelming. He held up his hand. Ready? I nodded a bit reluctantly. He raised his hand and drew in a breath, implying I do the same. I followed his lead, inhaling as deep into my belly as I possibly could. His hand stopped right next to his face, and he began lowering it, exhaling. I did the same. As promised, we repeated this exercise twice before he nodded, satisfied. He then crossed his arms in front of him on the table, anchoring himself in place as he leaned forward, looking me dead in the eyes. You're not where you think you are right now. You're actually... He paused and considered for a moment. Well, essentially you're dead. I sat in stillness, my confused frown sinking even deeper. He continued. Your consciousness is right here, right now, but your body's strapped to a stretcher in the back of an ambulance on its way to a hospital. I kept my frown pointed right at him. I don't think I blinked or broke eye contact for a solid 5 minutes. The only response that felt natural was to just laugh at him. He had to be messing with me after all. Weird and as morbid of a joke as it was. So that's what I did. I laughed. All the while his face remained stern. Yeah, I know, he said. Sounds a little Looney Tunes, don't it? I nodded. Yeah, dude, just a little Looney Tunes. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's the truth. And the more time we piss away chatting about it here, is more time we lose getting you out. I'm telling you this because we don't have too much longer. Too much longer before what? I asked in a sardonic tone. A plague of locusts? Raining frogs? He looked down and shook his head sadly. Oh, God almighty. You're gonna want me to convince you somehow, aren't you? My smirk disappeared. Well, he went on, sitting back in his seat and crossing his arms. Which should it be, Spud? You want to see a plague of locusts or raining frogs? The way he said it was off-putting. I knew he had to have been crazy to begin with, whether he was messing with me or not, but the confidence he delivered this threat with seemed so sincere that I couldn't help but feel he believed he could make it rain frogs by simply snapping his fingers. He just sat back awaiting my response with raised eyebrows. You know, it'd be one hell of a mess, but I could even make it do both if that'd please you, he added. I stared at him, my nerves starting to grow weaker and weaker by the second. I simply had no response. He finally shrugged. Alright, what color do you want the frogs to be? At that, I jumped straight up out of my seat and headed for the door, leaving him to sit there alone in the booth. I pointed to him with a shivering finger. Don't follow me, you're crazy. He just stayed in his seat. A look of mild but unsurprised disappointment on his face. Before I was out the door, I heard him shout, That's fine. Guess I'll just choose myself. The words struck me in the back of my head, but I didn't dare turn to answer. Just flew out the door. There in the lot sat an old tow truck with Driscoll's Towing painted elegantly on the driver's side door. Had to be his. I pondered the coincidence of the name Driscoll, but my feet were insistent on leading me back to my car. Back to safety. I got in, slamming the door behind me. I sat there for a few minutes trying to keep myself from hyperventilating. I dug out my keys while glancing over my shoulder. My nervous and twitching hands failed me as I attempted to put the keys in the ignition, dropping them on the floorboard instead. "Aw, man," I exclaimed. Without hesitation, I dove into the dark after them. I pawed at the carpet with mad determination. When my fingers had finally grazed the keys, thonk, something had hit the hood of my car. I froze. I closed my eyes. A horrifying assumption was creeping up on me. No, I thought. You're tired and you're stressed out, and you're imagining things. It's not what you think it is. I slowly lifted my head, clutching the keys in my fist. When I opened my eyes and peered over the steering wheel, I saw the two blinking, beady black eyes of a frog staring right back at me. He was electric blue with black spots. My brain was swimming. It was just a tiny, harmless amphibian, but my mind could not handle what was right in front of me. Just as I was having a hard enough time grappling with the presence of one frog, thunk, another one of the exact same coloration landed on my windshield, right in front of my face. Oh, Jesus! I let out uncontrollably. Another moment longer, thonk, another frog, followed by another, and then another, and then another. Christ, save me from this incredibly stupid thing I'm about to type. It was raining frogs. Reality as I knew it was folding completely in on itself. As I sat staring out at the bizarre and unexplainable downpour, a voice rang out with gravelly enthusiasm from the passenger seat. "I always liked blue for some reason." It was him. "Used to have a car that exact shade." He gestured to the frogs. I pinned myself back against the door. He held his hand up. "No, please don't go running off again. I'm tired, and as I've mentioned before, we're low on time." "Who are you?" I demanded. "Are you the devil or something like that?" He let loose a cool laugh. "Aw, the hell with the devil. I ain't no devil. I'm here to take you across plains, you understand?" He clapped his hands together, and in an instant the frogs had all disappeared. I tried to slow my breathing as I leered at him. "What do you mean by that?" I asked. Very calmly, he elaborated. "I'm transporting you from the land of the living to your soul's place of eternal rest. That clear and purty enough for you?" I squinted. "So what? You're taking me to heaven?" "There's tons of names for it, but that suits it fine. If you'd like. Yes, I'm here to take you to heaven." He was starting to get annoyed. I looked around, still trying to get a grip on everything that was happening around me. I looked again at the stranger. "How do I know you're not something else?" He shrugged. "Well, I got no reason to lie to you. Death is death, son." I sized him up again. "And what if I don't go with you?" "You don't want to do that. Trust me," he said grimly. "If you just stay here, the darkness will swallow you whole. You'll be stuck in a state of eternal misery, lost and lonely, scouring a plain of anger and sadness until the very end of time. And you can forget about finding a way out. There is none. Right now's the only chance you got. Now let's please get a move on, huh?" I stared out ahead. I didn't know what to believe. I couldn't fathom the thought of being dead. I just couldn't. I was just a kid. I'd just started my freshman year of college. I had so much I wanted to do still. I wanted to see my friends and family again. I didn't want to be dead. I looked at the stranger in my passenger seat. "Hey, I'm sorry. What's your name?" He sat back and glared at me as if it should have been obvious. "Driscoll. Come on." "Hell, I put it up everywhere. Figured you could have made the connection by now." Yeah, my mistake, I guess," I said. "Well, Driscoll, I don't suspect there'd be a possible third option here, would there?" He began to roll his eyes and shake his head at me. "If I've gone over this with one, I've gone over it with everybody. No, you cannot come back to life. Highly unadvisable." "Unadvisable?" I leaned forward. As in, it can be done. He stared at me, caught and somewhat embarrassed. I did not say that. Whatever it is, I have to at least try. I insisted. He immediately countered me. Ain't worth the risk. Look, Driscoll, please, man. I was desperate and close to tears. You gotta tell me how to get back. I don't want to be dead. I'm only 19. There's so much I want to see and do still. Please, help me. He narrowed his eyes at me, then turned to stare straight ahead. He sat there mulling it over for a moment before finally sighing. Okay, but I'm warning you. What I'm about to say is not nearly as easy as it's gonna sound. If you really want to appeal your fate, you gotta get out of town. Go back the way you came. I stared at him and repeated, back the way I came? But the path will be different. Your mind is already on its way out. Therefore, your memory will have a very difficult time comprehending what's actually what, and where it really needs to go. If you can't find your way out in time, that's it. You're stuck forever. I weighed my odds. I looked out at the street and remapped the route I took to get here in my head. My hands tightened around the wheel. I nodded. It's still my mind. I can get there. Driscoll gave me an uncertain look. That's been the attitude of most guys who didn't quite make it. But I will. I put the keys in the ignition and started the engine. I swung the car back out onto the street, pointed in the direction from where I had approached earlier. Resigned, Driscoll turned to face me. You sure? This is what you want to do then? I looked back at him. A ray of white light shone behind us. He pointed to it. It's not too late. I looked over my shoulder to see what looked like a split opening placed perfectly on the horizon. The white light pouring through in alluring rays, like the most intense sunrise you could imagine. I stared into it for a bit longer, wondering if I was making the right choice, but no. I knew what I had to do. I had to at least try. I looked at Driscoll and nodded. This is what I want to do. He gave me a nod. Best of luck then. I cracked a smile at him. Guess I'll see you when I'm older. He laughed and patted me firmly on the shoulder. Then he was gone. The light had vanished. I drove the Taurus down the desolate streets. A neon violet lightning started to crack and ripple throughout the atmosphere. I kept my breathing as steady as I could manage. My eyes darted back and forth in the darkness. Driscoll was right. The buildings down Main Street had taken on different forms. What were once unkept and familiar-looking establishments were now tall, gangly, distorted caricatures of what they used to be, like something from a surrealist nightmare. They all stretched up and loomed over me, their frames moaning, creaking, and snapping as the windows gazed down at me like plate glass eyes. I stomped on the accelerator, trying desperately to blaze through the decaying insanity, but it was as if it had no end. It was like being on a treadmill. I found the turnoff just towards the first Driscoll station I'd encountered. I could see it in the distance, writhing and heaving and bending down to the rupturing soil like a flower wilting and dying in suspended animation. It was all too much to behold, but I knew now that I was close to entering the outer reaches of town from where I'd come in. I clutched the steering wheel in preparation for the upcoming turn. When I finally got close enough to see where I anticipated it would be, I found a dead end leading to nothing but pure darkness. The brakes screeched as I pounded on them with both feet. The car skidded forward before coming to a complete stop. I rolled down the window and stuck my head out, making sure what I was seeing was correct. I thought, what now? The black inked sky set forth a long, forceful groan that echoed over the twisted, nightmarish landscape like thunder. My confidence was beginning to crumble. It was still my mind, yes, but it was beginning to work against me. I sat back in my seat and backed the car around. I had to find an alternate route. Heading back the other way, I scoured for connecting streets that could possibly serve as a path, gearing me back towards consciousness. No luck. By this time, it was a straight shot in both directions. leading to dead ends. I was beginning to panic again. There was no way out. Everything around me, that was me. Me quickly deteriorating. A strange feeling began to overtake me. It was growing more and more apparent that I was never going to make it out of here. And I was angry. Not just angry, but determined. Determined to break out by any means possible. If I had to bend heaven and earth to do it. I swung the car back around and pointed it towards the east edge of town, where I knew I came from. The ground quaked beneath me. A mad whirlwind was beginning to swirl over the disfigured structures. I looked down at the fuel gauge, the needle just barely touching empty. I put my focus back on the end of the road. I drew in one final breath and stomped on the gas. The engine revved as the car barreled towards the black mass of nothing. It was about then I felt myself begin to let go. Once it picked up top speed and leapt straight ahead into the darkness, I could feel myself being flung through the windshield. I never touched down. I just hung in the air in suspended motion. Zero gravity. Nothing around me but blackness. Nothing more to be heard. I stayed in this state for what felt like 5 minutes, before a blinding light cascaded over me. It was jarring, like staring straight into an explosion. I winced and turned my head away, the intensity too much to stand. Then there was a sound echoing, a high-pitched beeping. It was consistent, almost rhythmic. After a moment or two, it started to become more familiar. It was a heart monitor. A voice echoed over me. "We have movement." I was alive. I stared in disbelief as my hands began to shake so hard, I almost dropped the test. 2 pink lines. "Sam, we did it. We finally did it. We're going to be parents," I screamed with joy. We had been trying for over 6 years. 6 years of tears and heartbreak. 6 years of seeing those around us start their own families, leaving us behind. And now, after all this time, it was finally our turn. The pregnancy was relatively easy. Minimal morning sickness, minimal weight gain. It was truly every woman's dream. As the 9 months of anticipation and anxiety were drawing to a close, our excitement grew. We finished up all our last-minute projects, from building the crib and decorating the nursery, to packing our bags and installing the car seat in place. We had taken all the classes, read all the books, and bought every single one of the little gadgets marketed to new parents. We were ready to bring our baby home. In the early hours of March 13th, Damien Michael entered the world. He let out a loud cry, as if he were claiming victory over the 6-year war we had fought. Our little family was finally complete. After cleaning him off, the nurses brought our baby boy back over to us. "He's beautiful, Liz. He even has your blue eyes," Sam said, with tears filling his own. I replied, "He's perfect. Absolutely perfect." Our hearts felt so full of love, they could burst. For hours upon hours, we just stared at him in awe. We obsessed over every detail, from his cute little chunky cheeks and baby soft skin to his little fingers and toes. I marveled at this bundle of joy lying before us, sleeping without a care in the world. Even though today marked the first day of our lives together, I didn't feel like I was staring at a stranger. It felt as though we knew each other, like I had known him my whole life. We quickly traded our infatuation for exhaustion. The reality of having a newborn set in quickly. The first 6 weeks were rough. I hadn't slept or showered in what felt like years. Naps were pointless. When I was actually able to rest, I would wake up feeling even more sluggish than before. Chores were neglected, filth gathered in all corners of the house. Burp cloths, dirty diapers, and takeout boxes all piled together. Eventually, though, we started to get the hang of this parenting thing. The mountains of dirty diapers and laundry disappeared. Entire populations of dust bunnies were decimated, and I started smelling more like cherry blossom soap and less like a sweaty cow. For a while, we had peace. It was little things at first. Some nights, the baby monitor would just show static or make weird noises like unintelligible whispers. Other nights, I would open the door to his nursery, and it seemed as though the shadows fled from view, huddled together in a corner out of sight. Then it escalated. For a few nights in a row, toys that Damien wasn't old enough to play with would be out of place. At first, they would be scattered around the nursery floor. I would pick them up and hide them away, hoping to fool whatever invisible force was moving them. I had no luck, though. The next day, after I managed to get Damien down for a nap, I tiptoed out and quietly closed the door. I was met with an obstacle course of building blocks. Blocks that weren't there when I entered the room. The following night, at 2 a.m., I woke up to find a stuffed teddy bear positioned upright at the end of the bed, the lifeless plastic eyes looking directly at me. I really need whatever it is going on to stop. I sighed with exasperation. I threw a blanket over my head and prayed sleep would come to me once more. I tried to explain these things away, to rationalize them in my head so that I could sleep easier at night. Maybe Sam was just trying to mess with me. Maybe I was just so sleep-deprived that I was having lapses in memory. I settled on the latter explanation. But much like a rubber band, it could only stretch so far before it snapped. One evening, after what felt like an eternity, Damien was finally asleep. Despite my desire to jump into bed and call it a day, chores still had to be done. I looked at the clock. 9:46 p.m. I guess Sam must be working late, I muttered to myself. I propped up the baby monitor and started on the dishes. They felt never-ending. I was trapped in a purgatory of suds and dirty dishwater. Scrub, rinse, repeat. I checked the clock again, thinking surely hours must have passed. 10:07 p.m. Maybe I should just head to bed and finish this up tomorrow, I said, feeling defeated. I dried off my hands and picked up the baby monitor. That's when I noticed that it kept on cutting to static, despite showing full bars on the screen. This is what happens when you go for the cheapest option, I sighed, smacking the side of the monitor. I must have broken it because then the audio went dead. I smacked it again, hoping for a better result, and when the audio came back to life, it began to emit an eerie lullaby. That's weird. I know I didn't turn on the sound machine. Trying to brush off the feeling of unease, I turned the kitchen light off as I headed towards the hallway. I didn't make it 3 steps before the light flicked back on, then off. On, off, on, off. Before I could decide what to do, the living room light started to do the same thing. On, off, on, off. Every single light in the house soon joined in on this cruel joke. Pop. I tried flicking them back on. No luck. Hello? Nothing. I was entirely alone. I tried to carefully make it out of the kitchen, using the light from the baby monitor to guide my way. Hello? Hello? I stopped in my tracks. The voice was coming from the monitor. The voice that replied was my own. Slowly, I turned the monitor over, hands shaking. There he was. Damien. The baby who could barely hold up his head was holding on to the wooden slats of the crib. He looked directly into the camera, directly into my soul. Frightened, I dropped the monitor onto the ground, sending the house into darkness. The sound echoed down the hallway, followed by cries not long after. When I picked it up, he was lying in bed, as though nothing had happened. I desperately need to sleep. I entered the nursery and scooped him up out of bed, heart still racing from earlier events. I sat in the rocking chair and looked around. Nothing was out of the ordinary. The sound machine was off, nightlight on, no mysteriously placed toys. You need to get a grip, Liz. You're a mother now. You must be brave. I tried to calm myself as we rocked back and forth. I pulled Damien close and whispered in his ear, "It's okay, baby. Mama's here. You're safe." We rocked some more in peace and quiet, both of us fighting off sleep. Breaking the silence, something whispered, "But you aren't." My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. The voice was coming from the bundle in my arms. Fighting the urge to run, I forced myself to look at Damien. He was quietly sleeping, his chest rhythmically rising and falling. Of course it didn't come from him. He's just a baby. Geez, Liz, you really need sleep, I said to myself, not exactly helping my case. I stared off into space trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I'm not a particularly superstitious person, but it was hard to find a logical explanation for everything. Was there a power surge? No, the nightlight was unharmed by whatever happened. What about what I saw? What I heard? I had no clue how to even begin to comprehend that. Breaking me from my trance, I heard the front door creak open. Sam's home. Thank God. After carefully laying Damien down in his crib, I tiptoed out and closed the door. I needed to tell Sam everything that happened. Before he could fully make it through the door, I relayed everything that had just happened in a single breath. Whoa, slow down, babe. What's going on? Something's not right, Sam. First the lights, then the voice. Something's going on and it's really scaring me. What do you mean? There's nothing wrong with the lights, he said. Reaching out, he flipped on the kitchen light. The light bulb glowed as it illuminated the room, with a gentle hum that seemed to mock me. But they were going off on their own, I swear. Well, they're working now, Sam said, gently kissing my forehead. We walked to the nursery so Sam could see Damien before bed. Quietly sneaking in, he walked over to the crib and whispered goodnight. See, Sam said, walking out. There's nobody there, Liz. As we walked back to our room, I felt foolish, like a kid making their dad look under the bed for monsters. I could have sworn I heard a voice in there. Sam broke me from my thoughts. Is everything okay, babe? I'm a little worried for you. Yeah, I'm fine. I guess I'm just exhausted. It's nothing, really. He sighed. Okay, if you say so. I could tell he didn't entirely believe the excuse I gave him, but he didn't push. He kissed me goodnight and turned off the lights. I could hear him snore as I was ruminating over everything that happened in the last few hours. I couldn't explain things away anymore. I was at a loss. I know I heard a voice tell me I wasn't safe. I know I saw Damien standing in his room. All the weird stuff that had been happening, it started when we brought Damien home. I couldn't tell Sam the truth. I couldn't tell anyone the truth. If they knew, they would think I really was going crazy. I had to find some way to prove I wasn't just imagining things. I tried to quiet my mind and go to sleep. When I awoke, Sam had already left for work. I wanted to push the events of the night before out of my mind, but I wasn't having much success. It was all I could think about. I laid in bed and tried to brainstorm ways to come up with proof. Maybe I could record the monitor, or start taking pictures when things are out of place. I thought. All I wanted is for someone to believe me. I looked for answers on Reddit for over an hour, but my searches brought up nothing. I swung my legs off the bed and stood up. I reached for the door handle but paused when I noticed light shifting under the door. There was something, or someone, waiting for me on the other side. Unsure of what to do, I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping it would go away. Mama? I see you, Mama. This can't be happening. This isn't real. I held my eyes closed so tightly that my eyelids started to ache. Why are your eyes shut, Mama? Are we playing hide and seek? It said in a sweet, innocent sort of way. I don't think I want to play with you right now, I said. I attempted to sound confident, but my voice betrayed me. But I want to play now. I'll hide first, the voice said in an angry growl. As the shadow disappeared, I heard skittering across the hardwood floor. My heart pounded so loud. It felt like each beat shook the room. Cold sweat droplets formed on my head. I felt dizzy. I needed to find Damien. I needed to know the truth. Was all of this really his fault? Surely it couldn't be. Unless that thing wasn't my baby. Could a monster have really taken Damien and replaced him? If that was true, that meant my son was out there somewhere, all alone. I had to find my baby. I needed to know the truth. Still terrified, I slowly opened the door. I knew I had to get to the nursery to see if Damien was still in his crib. That would give me the answer I was searching for. I tried to creep down the hallway, having to remind myself to breathe. I was close. I could feel it. I would finally have my answer about the voices, the toys, the baby monitor. Everything. I opened the door and to my surprise, Damien was awake in his crib just staring at the ceiling. "Thank God it's not you," I said, with a small sigh of relief. I'm not sure what outcome would have been better. On the one hand, this meant something else was responsible for all the supernatural occurrences. On the other hand, at least I still had my baby boy. I stared at him, admiring my creation, my little lighthouse in this dark sea of torment. That's when I saw them. His eyes, staring back at me, were two hazel-colored eyes. My stomach turned. I felt like I was going to be sick. No, this can't be. Damien always had blue eyes. I cautiously walked away from the crib. I didn't want to agitate whatever creature had replaced my baby. I don't know what you did with my son, but I will find him. I know the truth now, I whispered. I needed to get out of there. Slowly his head turned. Those two soulless hazel eyes were now locked onto me, its face cold and expressionless as it watched me sneak out of the room. I sprinted to the living room, trying to be as far away from the nursery as possible. "Pick up, Sam, pick up," I said desperately. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. "Please leave your message." I redialed. After the fourth try, Sam finally picked up. "Liz, is everything okay? You don't normally call me when I'm at work." "No, Sam, nothing is okay. I need you to come home right now. Whatever this thing is in our house, it's not Damien. I have proof," I said in a harsh whisper, praying it didn't hear me. "I can't come home just yet. I'm sure everything is fine, Liz. Just keep an eye on Damien until I get back," he replied with worry in his voice. "That thing is not Damien. What don't you understand? Why don't you believe me?" He sighed. "It's not that I don't want to believe you, babe, but do you hear yourself? What you're saying really seems like a stretch." "You think I don't know how all this sounds, Sam? Do you think I'm making this up just for fun?" I said, choking on my emotions. "Its eyes, they're different, Sam. They're hazel. Damien's eyes were blue." He was quiet on the other line for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Liz, I think we need to talk to someone. Maybe a counselor or a therapist or something. You're really starting to worry me." "What about his eyes?" "Babe, don't you remember from the books? All babies start out with blue eyes. He's just starting to develop his true eye color. Look, I will tell my boss that I need to get off early and see what I can do. Just please don't do anything stupid. I don't want you to hurt yourself or Damien. Promise me." I had never heard this tone from Sam before. He sounded nervous, not afraid of what I said being the truth, but rather afraid of me. Afraid I would hurt our baby boy. "I promise, Sam. You know I would never hurt Damien. Just please come home quickly." "I'll try." After hanging up the phone, I plopped down on the couch, staring off in the distance. No one believed me. I was all alone. I held my head in my hands. I just wanted all of this to go away. Why me? Why did the universe decide to give us an angel, just to replace him with this creature, this demon? All I wanted was to have Damien back. "Get it together. You have to figure this out. You have to find your son." I got up off the couch and started pacing around the living room. I had to think. Whatever this thing is, it chose to replace my son. That meant it was probably safe to assume it was hiding its real identity. I just needed to find a way to show Sam. I knew what I had to do. I had to cause hurt. It's hard to keep up an act when you're bleeding out. I thought back to my call with Sam. I thought back to his plea and my promise. I meant what I said. I would never, ever hurt Damien. But that thing mocking me, wearing my son's face and mimicking his cries, I had to kill it. I went to the kitchen in search of something I could use as a weapon. I'm not sure what I needed to kill a creature like the one lying in the crib, but I prayed my sharpest knife would do the trick. I held the knife up, looking at myself in the reflection. My eyes were sunken into my face, cradled by dark circles. My face so pale, it was as if it were translucent. The highways of veins visible just beneath the surface. I looked frail and weak, like the life had been sucked out of me. This monster not only took my baby, but it was trying to take me as well. I refused to let that happen. I had to end this. I crept down the hallway holding the knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. Deep breath. This is it. Just kill it and then everything can go back to normal. I grabbed the door to the nursery, throwing it wide open. The crib was empty. It was on to me. I searched the nursery high and low, my heart slowly climbing its way into my throat. "Where are you?" I shouted. "I know you're not my son." No response. The house was completely quiet, but I knew I wasn't alone. I made my way to the living room. When it started to laugh, the sound made my skin crawl. What had started as a baby's laugh slowly turned into a deep, raspy chuckle. I stood scanning my surroundings and trying to hold the knife with all the confidence I could muster. "I won't let you do this any longer," I shouted. It appeared in the doorway. Despite the fact it stood no more than 3 feet tall, the sight sent fear throughout my body. It still looked like Damien, but it stood like a puppet. Little arms hung to the side unnaturally. Chunky little legs bent in ways that should be impossible to support any weight. Its head rested on its shoulder, drool pouring out of its mouth. "After I kill you, I will find my son." Its mouth curled into a grin too big for its face and let out a laugh. "If there's anything left for you to find." My knees felt weak. "Did you kill him?" I said, my voice faltering. "I can't tell you. It's a secret." It giggled in response. Out of nowhere, its little body began to twitch. Fast. It jerked its head around so hard I half expected it to tear right off and fall on the floor. I watched in horror as needle-like teeth began to poke through its soft, pink gums. Its bones started to crack and bend, creating unimaginable angles and shapes. Pieces stuck through the skin everywhere, creating a puddle of drool and blood. They would take on a new form before breaking again, the sound making me feel sick to my stomach. It was almost touching the ceiling. Its 10 little fingers and toes grew longer and longer, turning into razor-sharp claws. The skin of its previous form was too small to withstand its transformation. I heard the flesh pop and rip, revealing organs that squirmed like maggots. It began to patch itself back together with skin that came in all different shapes and colors. Is that the skin of all the people he imitated before Damien? I shuddered at the thought. I beheld the atrocity standing in the doorway, coming to the realization I was very unprepared to attack what was in front of me. At most, I would be lucky to survive. Before I had time to think, it swung at me, throwing me into the wall. I dropped the knife as I cried out. The impact sent pain ricocheting throughout my body and evicted the air from my lungs. Fumbling around, I tried to grab the knife as it charged at me again. I had just managed to wrap my fingers around the handle when it pinned me down. I could feel a claw sinking deeper and deeper into my shoulder. It held up my arm and sliced it with surgical precision, slitting my wrist. I managed to reach up and stab its abdomen, a trickle of black liquid pouring out. It didn't seem to faze it, though. I tried again and again, but the warm fluid made it difficult to keep a grip on the knife. It grabbed a fistful of my hair and dragged me into the kitchen. "Let me go," I screamed. "I can forget this ever happened, and you can keep playing pretend." Tears filled my eyes. It said nothing as it began to examine our utensils. Instead of choosing a sharp steak knife, it picked up a spoon. It admired its choice before lifting me up to meet its gaze. I screamed and thrashed as it slowly moved the edge of the spoon to my eye. My mind was racing. Is this how I die? Is this the end? I held my eyes shut as tightly as possible, knowing it wouldn't stop the inevitable. I prayed that Sam would find Damien after I died. If he was truly gone, though, at least we were about to be reunited. A car door slammed shut. I dropped to the ground. "Sam, help me!" I screamed, hoping he would hear me. He threw open the door, taking in the scene. Color drained from his face. The living room and kitchen had splintered wood and broken picture frames littering the floor. Blood was spilled everywhere, most of it my own. He ran over to me and grabbed a dish towel, trying to put pressure on my wound. "Liz, what happened? Where's Damien?" He got up with a sense of urgency and started to search the kitchen. "Thank God you're home," I said, trying to catch my breath. "I was right. That thing replaced Damien. We have to find him." "What thing? Liz, where is our son?" Sam said. He was rummaging through cabinets and the trash can, only adding to the chaotic scene. "I don't know, Sam. We have to find him." I reached out my hand and waited for help. It never came. Ignoring me, he moved room to room, turning the whole house upside down. "Sam, what are you doing? Damien's not here. We have to..." He stopped in his tracks and finally acknowledged me. "Elizabeth, what have you done with him? Where is our son?" I was taken aback. Why didn't he understand? Why didn't he believe me? "Tell me where he is or I'm calling the cops," he said with a mixture of heartbreak and hatred. "Sam, I told you I don't know. I promised I would never hurt our baby. I mean, look at this place. Look at me. Do you really think I did this myself?" I cried out, begging to be believed. He stared at me and tears began to fill his eyes. "I don't know, Elizabeth, but what I do know is that Damien is missing. And all that blood out there, there's no way it's just yours." He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Please, no." I was at a loss for words. In a matter of days, my whole life had fallen apart. Our miracle baby was gone. Or worse, my husband believed I killed him, and I was about to be arrested for a crime I didn't commit. Red and blue flashed through our windows. "Please find our baby, Sam. Please don't stop until you find him," I pleaded as they put me in the back of the car. He said nothing, turning away from me. In the following weeks, I was interviewed by numerous detectives and psychiatrists. Eventually, it was determined that I had experienced an extreme case of postpartum psychosis. I was found not guilty by plea of insanity, and as a result, they committed me to the state's psychiatric hospital. Sam visited me the day I got admitted. "Have they found Damien?" I asked as soon as he was seated. No, not yet. They're still looking. That's actually why I'm here," he said, refusing to meet my gaze. "Do you have any idea where you might have hidden him? I just want to put Damien to rest. Please." "Sam, I told you I didn't do anything. I don't know where he is." I sighed. "Okay, if that's all you have to say." He nodded to the supervisor, indicating he was ready to leave. Before he walked out the door, he turned back to me. I could see the tears in his eyes. "Goodbye, Elizabeth." I never saw him again. I'm not quite sure how long I've been in here. They have me on a heavy medication regime, so it's hard to keep track of time. It doesn't stop the nightmares from coming, though. I know what happened was real. I know what I lived through. I know Damien is out there somewhere. growing up without his parents. All I can hope is that he's had a good life. Most importantly, I know that creature is still out there somewhere, impersonating someone new. I just pray they put things together before it's too late.
Merry Christmas. I hope you're all enjoying the holidays so far. Today's video doesn't need much of an introduction. As the title would suggest, it is an hour of Christmas-themed stories. The writers' links are in the description if you wish to check them out. Huge thank you to all of them for making this video possible by allowing me to share them with you. Please be sure to drop a like and comment if you enjoy, as it helps the channel out in a very real way. Remember, you can send in your own stories to realstories@gmail.com if you'd like to have one featured in a video. Enjoy the stories, and have a very Merry Christmas. Natalie wasn't my friend, not even close. Was she my bully? I don't know. Would you consider the person that stole your dolls and broke them your bully? How about the person that spread every nasty rumor about you, even if they knew it wasn't true? If you answered yes to one or both of those questions, then yeah, she most definitely was. We lived right next door to each other. We could even see each other's bedrooms through our windows in each of our rooms. I mostly tried to keep the curtains closed so I wouldn't have to deal with her more than I already had to. There were a few moments where I felt some sympathy for her. Like how her parents never came to chorus concerts or never showed up to any of her extravagant birthday parties, and even missed her middle school graduation. But she would always lash out at others soon afterward. I guess that was her coping mechanism, in a sick way. I might have been one of her primary targets, but she was an apex predator. When you're rich, pretty, and act like you're at the top of a food chain, people will treat you as such. Anyone could be her prey. Still, she usually went after the most vulnerable. Monica, for example. Monica moved from Austria in 9th grade. She never shook her strong accent, and was probably never a social butterfly to begin with. It was extremely easy for Natalie to pick on her, and no one would stick up for her. Doing so would only make you her next target. That's why I didn't help Monica when I saw Natalie mocking her. I was walking home on the last day before Christmas break when I saw Natalie berating Monica for something or another. It didn't really matter with Natalie. She would find whatever could hurt you the most and used it to its fullest potential. Monica was starting to cry. I knew I should have helped her, but I wasn't brave enough to face Natalie's wrath. "You better stop it," Monica yelled. Or what? Natalie had her there. Well, Natalie's parents were far from Mother or Father of the Year. They did get her everything she wanted, from her sparkling diamond earrings to the principal ignoring her bad behavior in return for generous donations. If it could be bought, they got it for her. Monica's brows knitted together as she tried to think. The Krampus. The Christmas? Natalie's demeanor changed from haughty to confused in a second. Krampus. It's a demon that eats bad kids on Christmas. You could tell Monica realized how ridiculous it sounded the more she explained it. Natalie began to laugh. Oh my god, are you serious? I'm so sorry. Please tell Devil Santa Claus not to eat me, she said sarcastically. It's true. My grandma told me he ate a kid in her hometown. Monica was still clinging to the naive hope she would win this fight. You're so pathetic, it's almost sad. Natalie's voice was bright despite her cruel words. Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you go back to Austria and be the Krampus's Christmas dinner? You could prove the Krampus is real and rid the world of a waste of space. Monica's face was red and tears were streaming down it. Natalie walked away, apparently proud she had reduced a girl to tears for no real reason. Monica just stared into nothing before sobbing. I couldn't take it anymore. I slowly walked over to her. "Are you okay?" I asked, even though the answer was obvious. Monica hugged me instead of answering. I was a bit put off at first, but she was like a little kid, desperate for comfort. I began to soothe her as best I could. I wished Natalie would just disappear. She choked out between sobs. As terrible as it sounds, I thought the same thing. Natalie made people afraid of her, and then harvested that fear to make herself more powerful. I know that sounds far too dramatic for high school drama, but when you're crushed again and again, that doesn't register. I just wanted Natalie to leave me alone forever. I finally got my wish on Christmas Eve. I had gotten home from a family Christmas party. It was late and I just wanted to flop on my bed, fall asleep and awake to gifts under our tree. But Natalie couldn't even let me have that, I guess. The light from Natalie's room was pouring into mine. I went up to my window and looked into her room. Natalie was laying on her bed and seemed to be texting on her phone. She looked up from it and saw me. I pointed to her lamp and then to my bed. I don't know if she understood what I was trying to signal, but she just flipped me off before returning to her phone. "Merry Christmas to you too," I muttered. I decided to shut my curtains, hoping they would block out the lights. Before I closed them, I noticed something strange. Frost was creeping up Natalie's window. It was 60 degrees out, so frost was nearly impossible. And even if it was the right temperature, the frost was forming extremely fast. I stared at it in confusion. Natalie looked up from her phone. I don't think she noticed the frost at first, but I could see the confusion on her face soon enough. She went up to the window to examine it, I presume. She also started shivering. The frost was still climbing up her window at an alarming rate. Natalie tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. I found it funny, to be honest. The almighty Queen Bee, losing a fight against a window. Then I noticed it. It looked like a shadow was slowly forming behind Natalie. It rose higher than her head, while she remained utterly oblivious. I could barely make out Natalie's figure, while the shadow was even harder to see. I didn't realize the shadow was getting closer to Natalie, until a shape covered Natalie's throat. Natalie's hand shot up and grabbed onto the shape. While I couldn't see her face anymore, I could clearly tell that she was struggling against the grip. It was of no use, though. The shadow figure lifted her off the ground and away from the window. Natalie's legs kicked wildly as the figure lifted her even higher. I could now see the shadow's body. It appeared to have a large, human-shaped body from the neck down, but its head was weird. It was way too long. When the shadow turned, it almost looked like a Santa hat, since it seemed to slump at the end. It brought up what looked to be a bag. It roughly shoved Natalie inside the sack. It then closed it. I was too shocked to move for a second. I could only watch as the shadow threw the sack over its shoulder and turned its back toward the window. For a second, I thought it would leave or disappear. Then it turned its head back to the window and stared right at me. I yelped and closed the curtains as fast as I could. What the hell was that? I thought. Did I see Natalie get kidnapped? Was I dreaming? Did I hallucinate that? Before I could come up with an explanation, I felt intensely cold. I began to shiver. My breath looked like smoke in the air. I was baffled at first. Then I remembered how Natalie seemed to be before. Whatever that shadow thing was appeared. With a sick feeling in my stomach, I opened the curtains a bit. My heart stopped. The shadow figure wasn't in Natalie's room, and frost was quickly covering my window. I ran from my window to the door. No matter how hard I pulled, the door wouldn't open. I looked back and saw shadows slowly building up in the middle of the room. I began pushing against the door like a trapped animal. "Are you frightened, child?" I froze instantly. The voice was deep, cold, and old sounding. The words didn't sound like English, but I somehow understood them. I frantically tried in vain to open the door. I didn't want to look, but my head seemed to move without my consent. The first thing I noticed about the creature was how tall he was. His head almost touched the ceiling. To my horror, I realized the creature's strange head shape came from the fact he had horns. They were long and bent back at the ends. His face was the shape of a human's, but with a goat's nose and yellow, cat-like eyes. I could see fangs peeking out from behind his leathery lips. The creature took a step, with a loud clack. I looked at his leg and saw they were covered in thick fur. His feet were hooves. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The creature wagged his finger at me. Good children do not scream, and do not cry, but you're not a good child, are you? What? I was surprised I could speak, considering my voice was gone before. Who are you? The creature's lips peeled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. I am the Krampus, the punisher of ungrateful and cruel children. I'm not bad. The words rushed out of my mouth. I still barely understood what was happening, but there was a deep, primal fear building within me. Krampus chuckled loudly. Oh, really? So you have protected others, even if you had to put yourself at risk. You never wished ill of other humans, even if they had done you harm? My blood ran cold. How did you... I see your waking hours. I see your dreams. I see your thoughts. I see you everywhere, and you can never hide from me, no matter how hard you try. Please don't hurt me. I begged. I sunk to my knees. I'll be better, I promise. That's what they all say. Few ever keep their promises. Besides, that's not what I want from you. It's not? The Krampus gave me a morbid parody of a grandfatherly smile. Fear is such a powerful thing. The fear made you hate that girl, but also caused you to let her do as she wished. You let her torment poor Monica, and Monica, in her own fear, told cruel Natalie about me. And just a tiny bit of Natalie feared me, and that is what let me come. He took a lock of my hair and pulled on it. I winced from the pain. Fear of consequences is what keeps people good. When they ignore normal consequences, I become the consequences. And you will tell people of me. Sure. I was about to have a full-blown panic attack. I would have said anything to get the creature to leave me alone. The Krampus tissed. I wish I could believe you, but I think you'll need a reminder to keep your promise, so I will give you a gift. The Krampus reached into his large bag. There were shapes that poked through like they were trying to get out. As he opened it, hands reached out. I realized what those shapes were, the legs and arms of children trapped within. The Krampus pulled out Natalie. He was holding her by her face, his huge hand covering her mouth. Natalie desperately tried to get out of his grip, but Krampus was just too strong. Her eyes darted wildly around the room until they landed on me. We locked eyes. For the first and only time, we were able to truly empathize with each other. The Krampus used his free hand to grab onto one of Natalie's diamond earrings. Natalie, realizing what was about to happen, began to struggle even harder. I could only shut my eyes as hard as I could. I didn't hear Natalie scream or cry, but did hear a sickening and wet rip, quickly followed by another. I think I blacked out for a second because I can't recall much of what happened after that, until I heard the Krampus say, "Open your eyes." Too scared to defy him, I did as I was told. Natalie was gone. Krampus had the sack almost casually slung around his shoulder. For a blissful moment, I thought my fear-addled mind had simply imagined seeing Natalie. Then I looked down. A pair of sparkly diamond earrings laid at my feet. Blood was splattered at the ends, and a small piece of flesh was attached to each of them. I felt bile quickly move up my throat. I had to cover my mouth with my hand to prevent myself from vomiting. I swallowed the bile, my mouth tasting of bile acid. The corners of Krampus's mouth quirked upwards, whether it was from seeing me get his message, or just sick enjoyment from my terror. I don't know. Do you understand now? I nodded my head again and again. Yeah, I'll tell everyone. Tears of fear ran down my face. Just please leave me alone. The Krampus nodded his head calmly. Remember this last thing. Be good even when you think no one else is watching, because I am. He gave me a large, ravenous grin, and my Christmas feast could always be bigger. With that, he disappeared into the shadows. I'm sorry for telling you this. I wanted to pretend this never happened, but Natalie disappeared that Christmas. Billy, Amanda, Linda, all were known as naughty children, and they got whisked away on Christmas. Only I know by who. Still, I wasn't going to post this. Through some investigating, I learned they all knew about the rumors of Krampus. I realized why the creature wanted to spread his legend. Last week, Natalie's earrings showed up in my room. Even though I threw them out the Christmas Natalie became his victim, there was still dried blood on them. He's still watching me, and now he's watching you. Please forgive me, and pray you've been good, because the Krampus is coming soon, and he's ready for his Christmas feast. Let me just get this out of the way now. I'm a grown-ass man who has no friends or family within a 200-mile radius. No, it's not because of work or school. It's simply a conscious choice. I just don't like people. I'm sure my bitch of a wife and judgmental father can be blamed for that. I have anger issues myself, but at least I acknowledge my flaws. Call me a Scrooge, Grinch, or Grouch. I don't give a damn, but what you can't call me is crazy. I know what's been happening is real, and I feel utterly powerless to stop it. It started a week ago. I trudged like a zombie to my kitchen to start my day with a fresh cup of joe. As I yawned, taking my first sip, I noticed something in the living room. I jumped and cursed as I spilled hot coffee down my front. I threw my mug into the sink in frustration, ignoring the resounding crash as I bent low in self-defense. Fists raised feebly. That's when I realized that there wasn't a person in my house. It was a Christmas tree. Or something that was supposed to look like a Christmas tree. The tree was half dead, the smell of rotting pines assaulting my nostrils. I nearly gagged, wondering how I hadn't noticed it before. I could see termites scurrying all over the damn thing. Malcolm. It had to have been Malcolm, my landlord. No one else had a key to my apartment, and I wouldn't put it past him to play a prank on me like this. Still, this was not funny. I planned to call him and give him a piece of my mind. First, though, I had to get rid of the tree. I spent nearly half an hour hauling the big-ass thing out of my apartment and down to the side of the road, cursing and covered in termites. I called Malcolm and left him a wordy voicemail. Then I went to work and forgot about the little prank. Until the next day. The tree was back in my apartment, but now it had been adorned in rusty, busted-out Christmas lights. The odor was not nearly as sour as my attitude as I called Malcolm again. I demanded he come to my apartment. When he got there, he acted as though he had no clue how the tree had gotten into my home. He asked if I had any friends or family that had come into town. Upset that he was playing dumb, I threatened to talk to his superiors if this were to happen again. Malcolm once again assured me that this was not his doing, but he would change my locks and help me get the tree out of my dwelling. I could smell the tree as soon as I woke up the next morning. Furious, I threw my bedroom door open and stormed into the living room. The tree was back, busted lights, pentagram-shaped star and all. But now there was something under the tree as well. A box wrapped in blue wrapping paper. I had had enough. I called the cops. The cops took the gift, considering it was a suspicious package, and left an officer to watch over my apartment for the night. I got a call from work later that day from one of the officers down at the station. The gift box had contained a human finger. They were gonna need me for questioning. This had gone from annoying to immediately concerning rather quickly. After spending hours at the police station, the officers advised me to find a hotel to stay in. I did, and guess what I woke up to see the next day? The same Christmas tree. There was another box underneath, this one decked in purple wrapping. I thought that I was losing my mind. In an anxiety-induced craze, I ripped open the gift rather than calling the cops again. There was a whole hand this time, though it was missing the ring finger. I didn't call the cops this time. I set the tree and the box ablaze after hauling them into a secluded area. I sped back home and began grabbing my most important possessions. I told Malcolm that I was breaking my lease, and there was nothing he could do to stop me. Then I set off on the road, driving for hours and hours, before finally pulling over to at least get a nap. When I awoke, I found a new box beside me. Though I didn't want to open it, I could hear a woman's voice in my ear, urging me to do so. I tore the box open and nearly vomited. A whole arm had been crammed inside. I have been getting a new body part every day. I am confessing to you that I recognize them very well. I don't know if the police are after me, but I'd rather be caught by them if we're being honest. I don't think it will save me. I murdered my wife last Christmas, but I suppose she wants some company this year. What do you guys do on the day of Christmas? I bet it's much better than what happens to me every year on this sacred holiday. What is it like? To drink hot chocolate while munching happily on butter-churned cookies. To stare intently at the warm fireplace providing you with a sense of reassurance through the bitter cold winter. There might even be a joyful Christmas tune, masking itself in the dense background. So is Christmas your favorite holiday? It definitely isn't mine. It's not that I'm missing anything or living under poor conditions. My parents never failed to decorate our lawn with a variety of sparkling ornaments. Despite the loads of work we must complete, our Christmas tree still stands tall in the living room in every passing year. Yet I still hate it, and I despise it because of something I've never told my parents, nor anyone close to me in my life. A secret I have been latching onto for years, and I'm still debating whether or not to share it now. Despite the worry, if this doesn't go out fast enough, sooner or later I'll be dead with the rest of the lot. A while ago, maybe 10 years prior to the moment I addressed this concern, my sister was abducted on Christmas Eve. It had been a joyful day for me, as well as my family who spent long hours trying to make this holiday an exceptional experience. Our dinner consisted of boiled bean sprouts with all the festivities a household needed. Later that night, my younger siblings and I played a few board games with each other, doing your usual brother-sister activities. Although this happened ages ago, it still puts a smile on my lonesome face. That is, until I remember the events that occurred hours after this cheerful celebration. I was laying in my bed, contemplating various ideas regarding my family's next Christmas. All of it was a blur, but for a moment I heard something plop down the chimney. As a child, I really believed in Santa Claus, thinking he'd come to deliver presents to my door. I hopped out of my mattress and tiptoed to the edge of my door to take a quick peek. A large figure of a man blocked my vision, his boots making soft crunching noises on the carpet. I was so elated that I didn't notice the door of my sibling's room wide open. On that night, my youngest sister was taken away, and since then, she's never come back. After that incident, my parents called private investigators to locate her, worried to death about her whereabouts. It's been so long since that tragic loss hit my family, and we've seemed to have forgotten it. But every Christmas since then has been solemn. It hurts my heart every year when I look at their sorrowful faces and Realized that I witnessed what happened that night, but I never tell them. The young ones sleep in the master bedroom now, my parents protecting them from harm. I guess that's better off for them, knowing that the man still lurks. Every night I hear a plop from the chimney, and every year I wish Christmas never existed. He always taunts me, his long white beard brushing across my chin. I know you're awake. During the Christmas season, everyone is happy and cheerful. Everyone but me. I don't think I could ever be happy during this time of the year again, ever since what happened a few years ago. Anyway, I think the year was 2015. It was Christmas Eve. My parents and I were getting ready for the Christmas party the next day. I was making sure the house was nice enough for the party when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turned and saw a man outside my house. He was looking at me through a window. Before I had time to get a good look at him, he ran away. I went outside to find him, but I found no traces. Since there was no snow outside, he left no footprints. I thought that it may have been one of our neighbors, so I let him get away. I decided that if I saw him again, I'd call the cops. Everything seemed normal until the next day, Christmas. My aunts, uncles, and cousins came. It just so happened that it was snowing outside, so my cousin, Raymond, who had never seen snow before since he lives on the other side of the country, went outside to play in it. He was out there for a few minutes when we wanted him to come back inside. I looked everywhere in the yard to find him. Since there was snow, I was able to find footprints leading into a forest near our house. What alarmed me was that there were 2 sets of footprints. There was no one outside with him, so I began to wonder who on earth it was. I then noticed that the footprints were arranged. It appeared that either he was being chased or he was chasing someone. I knew that he could be in danger, so I went into the forest to find him. I was walking in the forest for what was probably 10 minutes when I saw something red behind some bushes. I got closer and saw what it was. It was a man with a red coat carrying a big sack. It looked an awful lot like Santa, but I knew it wasn't him. I had to ask him if he's seen Raymond, so I shouted out to him, "Hey you!" He turns towards me. It wasn't Santa. It was a beardless man who appeared to be in his 30s or 40s. "What?" he shouts in a not very nice tone. "I'm looking for a teenage boy. He has black hair, blue jeans, and a olive green jacket." Even though this man and I were 50 feet away, I could see his brows raising when I said that. He says, "Oh, in that case, I'm looking for you." I got a little frightened by that statement, but I didn't run. I just stood there. The man got closer. I could see more details of him, more horrifying details. He had a huge scar on his face, a machete, and a huge boot knife. The scariest thing was that his coat wasn't red. It was originally a lighter color, but it appeared that it was stained by a crimson red substance. He drops the sack in front of me. He looks at me with his unnaturally gray eyes. "The name's Kris Kringle. Merry Christmas." After that was said, he runs away into the forest. I'd never seen a human run that fast. I looked back down at the sack. I noticed that there appeared to be blood coming from the bottom of it. I was a little hesitant to open it, but I did anyway. I was disgusted and horrified to see what was inside. It was Raymond's dismembered body. His head and foot were towards the top of the sack. Something was carved into them. On his head, "I see you when you're sleeping. I know when you're awake. And you better watch out, or you'll look like this someday," was carved onto his foot. I ran home as fast as I could. I told my family what happened and called the police. For my family's sake, I never showed them Raymond's body. Still, my Uncle Jack and Aunt Amanda, Raymond's parents, were devastated. The police couldn't find the man, and they still can't. I really hope they find him soon, because I've been starting to catch glimpses of the man out of the corner of my eye whenever I'm outside. I'm afraid I'm on his list. If you have seen this man before, or if you have any idea who he could be, let me know. I've seen her again, the girl in the snowstorm. I didn't know that I was in danger the first time I saw her. On the contrary, it was an experience that I kept thinking about all winter. It was over a decade ago, and I was visiting a friend that morning to drop off a Christmas present for him. It was a few miles from home, but I enjoyed the walk, despite it being an even colder winter than usual. My mother had warned me to return home soon, as the local news were predicting a blizzard that evening. So I kept my visit brief, and started home that afternoon. By the time I'd made it halfway, the wind was brutally cold, and the snow was falling so heavily that I could barely see where I was. It was too late to turn back and bunker down at my friend's place, so I had to keep walking home. I wore glasses back then, switched to contacts a few years back, and had to take them off. It was bad enough to see everything as white blurs, but it was impossible to see anything through wet, snow-covered lenses. Walking through a blizzard without being able to see is a helpless feeling. You can only hope that you're heading the right way, fighting the wind not just to stay upright, but to make sure that you don't lose your sense of direction. You can't see the nearby buildings very well, and you're constantly on the lookout for familiar sights that can tell you where you're at. I followed the sidewalk as best I could, occasionally stepping off the curb or onto someone's lawn. It was in this blurry haze of wind and snow that I first saw the girl. The first thing I noticed was the red scarf, blowing madly in the wind. She was walking in the opposite direction, and at first, it looked like she was on the other side of the streets. The closer she got, the more I questioned what direction I was looking in. Was she crossing the streets? Or was I not walking on the sidewalk anymore? I could barely tell where I was. I took a moment to make sure I was still on the sidewalk, and by the time I confirmed where I was, the girl was only a few yards away. I could see her more clearly. She was wearing a mismatched assortment of winter clothes, and a lot of layers, even 2 hats. Her puffy blue jacket was oversized and unzipped, and underneath I could see that she was wearing another heavy coat. She didn't look intimidating at all. On the contrary, she looked vulnerable. She was short and notably thin, almost unhealthily so. I was almost 10 at the time, so I imagined that she couldn't have been older than that. The way she was bundled up in so many layers of clothes made her look uncomfortable, and gave her an uneven, lumpy shape. I assumed at the time that she was poor, maybe even homeless. Instead of walking past each other, we simply stopped in front of one another. Something compelled me to stare down at her, and she looked up at me with a sort of vague expectation. Her hats and scarf covered most of her face, leaving only her eyes and part of her cheeks visible. Her eyes were big and dark, like black holes against her pale skin and the surrounding snow. I lost myself in her stare, like I was falling into her eyes. It was like I was in some sort of trance, pulled to her without realizing it. She took her earmuffs off, but didn't speak. "Hi," I said weakly, not knowing what to say. She looked me up and down, and something about that made me shiver, even in the cold. It was like she was taking stock of me, of what I had to offer. Before I could ask what she wanted, the girl held her hands up. They were pale, shaking, bare. The girl didn't have any gloves. Something about the way she looked at me so impatiently made me look down at my own gloved hands. I didn't have a particularly good set of gloves, but they were the only pair I had. I looked at her again, and something about her big, dark eyes made me want to give them to her. I took my gloves off and held them out for her to take. I almost regretted it, But then her freezing hand touched my bare skin as she took them, and they were so cold that I knew I was doing the right thing. She put the gloves on, looked up, and smiled. The scarf was still covering most of her face, but I could see it in how her cheeks raised up, and in the sparkle of her eyes. As she started to walk past me, I realized that the blizzard was easing up. I put my glasses on, turned around, and looked at the girl. She had stopped walking, and was staring down at the gloves, admiring them. "Merry Christmas," I mumbled to myself, and she looked back at me, almost as if she could hear me over the wind. I waved, realized my hands were cold, and shoved them into my jacket pockets. She nodded and turned around, continuing her walk to wherever she was going, but not in any sort of hurry. I was only a block away from my house, so my hands weren't cold for very long. When I walked inside, my mother immediately noticed that they were missing. For some reason, I didn't tell her the truth, despite how chivalrous it would have made me sound. I lied, suggesting that I must have forgotten them at my friend's house, and went up to my room. Something about the girl made me want to keep our interaction private, like it was something special. I sat down on my bed and mulled over what I'd just experienced. I didn't have a crush on the girl, but something about the way she stared at me was so compelling, like I was defenseless against it. I wanted to see her again. I looked out from my bedroom window, somehow expecting to see the girl, and she was there, on the other side of the street. It was like she'd been waiting for me. I opened my window, blasted by cold air, and waved at her. She waved back, then started walking away. I watched her walk out of view, wondering who she was, where she had come from, and if she was ever there at all. Something about her felt unreal, like I'd vividly imagined her. I'd hoped to see her again that winter, but never did. Whenever I went outside, shoving my hands into my pockets, I wondered if she still had the gloves. Whenever I got home, I checked my window to see if she was standing on the other side of the street again, waiting for me. I daydreamed about running into her during one of my walks, which just so happened to become much more frequent, but I never saw her. Not as a child, anyway. That year was memorably cold. Blizzards moved in and out. Roads were all slick with ice, and inches of snow fell every day. We always had some snow, but that year was bad. The winters have been pretty heavy so far, but not on that level. We've had a lot of snow and ice, but no blizzards, yet. It's the perfect kind of winter for long walks in the snow. Last week I was enjoying the season and going on a long walk. It was snowing lightly, and the sky was a solid white of clouds. It was a very peaceful walk at first, but then I saw something in the distance, on the other side of the street. It was a girl, short and bundled up in layers of winter clothing. Most of the clothes were different, but the red scarf brought me back to that meeting a decade before. It was her. I'd been obsessed with this girl as a child, reminded of her every winter for years. It was like opening a time capsule of memories, buried in the back of my mind since I was in middle school. But at the same time, it was more than memories. She was standing right across the street, in mostly different clothes. But the girl was the same size, the same height, like she hadn't aged a day. I was lost in that impossible thought, wondering if she was just really short and petite, when I realized that she was crossing the street and heading in my direction. Does she recognize me? I wondered. I couldn't move, and I didn't want to. Something was so disarming about the surreal sight of this girl from 10 years ago. I remembered wondering, as a child, if I'd imagined her. Hadn't she followed me home and waved at me from across the street? Did I just make that up and forget that it wasn't true? She stopped right in front of me and looked up. I remembered how I looked down at her large eyes, so dark that they looked black against the white of her face and the snow. And here we were again. I was an adult, and sure enough, she was still a child. Her scarf still covered up her lower face, but I could see from the upper half that she looked exactly the same, like she walked through time to see me again. However, the clothes had aged. Her scarf was worn and stained, her jacket ripped in some places. She had a different pair of gloves that looked fairly new, and I wondered if some young boy gave them to her. Did he also think that he imagined her? She looked me up and down, and I remembered that she did the same thing last time, taking stock. I assumed in the moment that she was looking for something to ask me for, another article of clothing to keep her warm, and I was right. She settled on my scarf, and she lightly tugged on it, as if demanding it. I pulled off my scarf, ignoring how cold it made my neck, and handed it over. There was something so strange about the experience that I just felt like I had to go with it, if only to see where it was going. Like before, I was compelled by something in her stare to do what she wanted. I was transfixed by this impossible girl. Then she removed her red scarf, and I almost let myself scream. The skin of her mouth and chin were stained red, and large fangs jutted down from amongst her upper teeth. She looked up as she dropped her old scarf on the ground, and started putting mine around her neck, giggling at the sight of my fear. I was grateful when she covered her mouth with my scarf, but still terrified. I was glued to the spot, but desperately wanted to run. She'd had a sort of disarming aura about her, but it was gone, replaced by danger. I felt compelled to get away from this bloody-mouthed child, but frozen in place at the same time. She laughed again, the light and innocent joy of youth. And then she spoke. "I remember you. Did you move?" I nodded silently, otherwise unable to move. I couldn't stop staring at her eyes. At first, I'd assumed that they were brown and simply looked darker in contrast to the light, but now I could see the endless pits of blackness in her eyes. I could feel a sort of force moving from her eyes to me, compelling me to stay put and do what she wanted. She had me under her spell, and she knew it. It was funny to her. "Oh, I think I remember where you live then," she said before giggling again. "Thanks for the scarf, and the gloves. Stay warm." She walked past me. I heard her footsteps in the snow get farther away, but couldn't will myself to turn around. I didn't want to see her right behind me, admiring her scarf as she'd admitted the gloves I gave her a decade ago. Would I have waved at her too, if she was there? I imagined that I would have, if I had the feeling that it was what she wanted. When I got home, I locked the doors and windows, willing myself not to look out and see if she was waiting for me again, like she had been the first time. I haven't left the house since. I've tried to convince myself that she was imaginary, but I'd rather be terrified than let myself believe that I'm crazy. My mom asked me if I was okay yesterday. I brushed it off and asked her about the heavy winter a decade before. She recalled that it was particularly bad, even worse than they thought at the time. When I asked what she meant, she told me that the local news kept running stories that following spring about a few missing people who'd been found after the snow all melted away, dead on the side of the road, as if they'd just keeled over and been covered by the snow without anyone noticing. My mom remembered that one of the missing was from this side of town. I've since looked into it, and this side of town is really only a mile or so away from our home. The article I found mentioned that the person who discovered that body mentioned that there was dried blood on their coat and neck, like they'd cut themselves falling and bled to death right by the sidewalk. I have my own theories. You may be wondering why I'm staying indoors when the girl from the snowstorm knows where I live. The thing is, I'm not sure she can enter my home without an invitation. Either way, I'm not going to risk going outside again. Not that I have the courage to in the first place. I can barely will myself to look out the window at this point. I don't know what to do besides share my experience with all of you, in the hopes that you're also careful this winter. Even if you're not a local, there's no telling how many of these things are out there. And if you have to go outside, bundle up. Stay warm. About a 10-minute drive from my parents' house was a Christmas tree farm, owned and operated by a very nice couple called the Jacksons. As you can probably guess, college was very expensive for me and my family, so I worked almost full-time during the long breaks from school when I was at home. We'd been buying trees from the Jacksons for about 15 years, so they were more than happy to hire me for the month. Their whole operation covered about 6 square acres. I know that sounds like a ton, but they really were the only place you could cut your own tree in town. Sure, you could always buy pre-cut ones outside the grocery store, but you'd be missing out on the charm and feeling of satisfaction of cutting down your own, wouldn't you? The Jacksons themselves didn't have heavy jobs. They more than paid their due by growing and taking care of the trees all year. Dan would sit outside the door to his shed with a thermos of hot coffee, handling transactions as the buyer stopped to exchange cash. There was only one road on the entire property. It started at the entrance gate, wound around the house, and left by the exit gate. Unless you wanted to drive through a few acres of trees, there was no way you were getting out without paying. Dan kept a notepad in his pocket to catch the license plates of the runners. Wendy spent the mornings making Christmas cookies in the kitchen of the house before joining Dan outside in his vigil by the shed, giving each customer a Santa or Rudolph or tree-shaped treat, sometimes still warm from the oven. The 2 other seasonal hires and I did the other work. I helped the customers load the trees into their vehicle if they had trouble. Dolan and Liam, 2 friends who'd been working for the Jacksons as long as I had, cut down trees for people who either forgot their saw or didn't bring one. It was, all in all, a very easy-going, comfortable job. I didn't even mind that I was working full-time during the holidays. The day of December 19th started out like any other. I pulled into the lot in my dad's car at 9:30. Business wouldn't start for another half hour or so, but I liked to talk with Dan and Wendy beforehand. The sky was cloudy and gray, threatening to send some sort of precipitation down on us. I personally hoped it was snow, but then again, I was always close to the house and could run in for a bit whenever I got cold. I let myself in by the front door and walked into the kitchen. Wendy was just taking a bunch of cookies out of the oven. Dan was sitting at the counter, finishing off his breakfast. Last Christmas was blaring on the radio near the window. "Oh, good morning, Blake. I didn't hear you come in," Wendy said. "Sky looks pretty overcast today," I said as I leaned against the island. Dan nodded. "Weather report said it's going to start snowing in the afternoon. We might have 3 or 4 inches by tomorrow morning." We talked for a little while longer before we heard tires pull up outside. "That must be Dolan and Liam," Wendy said. "Blake, would you go out there and tell them to put on their warmest coats? I'd hate for them to catch a cold." Nodding, I went outside and caught them just as they were leaving the car. "What's up, man?" Dolan asked as he took out his saw from the back seat. "Weather report said it's going to snow today. Wendy wants you guys to put on heavier jackets or something," I said. Liam came around the side and snorted. "Oh please, around here, they always say it's going to snow every year, and what do we get? Maybe flurries if we're lucky. I wouldn't worry about it." Dolan slid on his jacket. "I don't know, man. Better safe than sorry." We heard the front door open and close as Dan stepped out, sliding on a pair of gloves. 4 more days of work, boys. Let's make this a good one." The time passed slowly, but I didn't mind. We got our first customers at 10:15, and by 11:30 the cars were really rolling in. I suppose if I thought about it, December 19th was a little late to be getting your tree, but who was I to judge? The 3 of us got free trees for our families, as well as the weekly paycheck. I took my lunch break around 2. I was sitting on the porch eating my turkey sandwich when the first snowflakes began falling. Wendy came out with her lunch and sat down beside me. Looks like it's going to be a white Christmas after all. I nodded. Yeah, I can't remember the last time we've had one like this. Hey, don't jump to conclusions. This stuff could melt away by tomorrow morning. So what? I'm an optimist. It turned out I was a little too much of an optimist. By 4, the ground had 3 inches of snow on it, and the drifts were only getting higher. Each time I saw Dolan and Liam head back out with another customer, it looked like they had another layer on. Dan had retreated inside the shed, and only came out when a customer came by. I didn't see Wendy out all day. Feeling the chill, I didn't blame her. The light was already rapidly disappearing by 4:30. At 4:45, I saw 3 shapes come out of the almost darkness, and join me on the porch. Dolan and Liam shivered beside me, while Dan whistled as he thumbled through the day's gains. Good job, boys. We sold 57 trees. Charged that for $30 each, and we got ourselves about $1,700. I'd say we're doing pretty well, don't you think? Liam nodded. Yeah, sure. Can we head out now? I want to get home before they decide to hold the Iditarod here. Oh, sure, you just... But Dan's sentence was cut off by headlights suddenly cutting through the snowy darkness. They shut off as we heard the car door slam. 2 figures came running towards the porch. Oh hell, what now? Liam groaned. Dolan punched him and told him to be quiet as they arrived. They took off their hoods and scarves, revealing a young couple. The woman stepped forward and began to speak, sounding very out of breath. Did we make it? You guys aren't closed, are you? Dan looked taken aback for a moment before responding. Why do you ask? The woman sighed and put her hands on her hips. We're visiting my parents tomorrow morning, and we won't be back until late Christmas Eve. This is the only day we can still get a tree. Can we buy one from you still? Dan looked a little taken aback before nodding. Hold on, let me go ask my wife. He disappeared inside the house, the door slamming shut behind him. The man smiled apologetically at us. We're really sorry about this. I know it's probably the end of your guys' shift, and you all want to go home, but we... The woman cut him short. Babe, it's okay. I think this place doesn't close till 5. The car clock said it was 4:47. She looked at us and smiled with the same regret as her husband. Sorry about this though, I know it's short notice. I stood up, putting my hand out. No trouble at all. I hope you guys can find a good tree in this weather. I think most of the good ones have been taken. The man sighed. Well, we'll just have to manage. The door opened again and Dan stepped out. Good news, you folks are gonna be our last customers of the day. We have over 6 acres of trees to choose from. I'm sure you'll find something you like. After all, we have the best Christmas trees in town. Dolan piped up from the bench. But please hurry up, we're freezing out here. The man laughed. Don't worry, we won't be long. Did you folks bring a saw? This place is cut your own, you know. No, we didn't. Don't worry, I'm sure one of these fine young men will be more than happy to accompany you on your search. Dolan and Liam both appear to be having a contest to see who could evade Dan's gaze more. Liam, get over here. Help these folks find the perfect tree. Liam groaned and stood up, taking his saw with him as he walked over. Sure, anything for you, Dan. The woman laughed as the 3 of them stepped off the porch and into the falling snow. We won't be long, 15-20 minutes at the most. Thank you. And with that, they were gone, swallowed up by the darkness between the trees. Could you boys wait here as well? They may want help loading that tree into their car, Dan asked. I nodded, but Dolan only groaned. I guess, I gotta. I'm sharing a ride with Liam anyway. The 3 of us headed into the house. We joined Wendy around the kitchen table and waited. Dolan and I browsed on our phones as the Jacksons drank coffee. Mariah Carey blasted All I Want for Christmas Is You in the background, but no one seemed to be in the seasonal mood at the moment. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. By the time 5:30 rolled around, it was pitch black outside. Wendy got up and went out onto the porch. I followed and we stood there. looking out at the swirling snow. "That couple and Liam should have been back by now, don't you think?" she asked, turning to me with a look of concern. "They said they'd be 15 minutes at most. It's been nearly 45. Maybe they're just taking a long time. After all, you guys have so many trees to choose from." Wendy opened the door and called inside. A moment later, Dan came out, followed by Dolan. "They have been out there a while, haven't they?" He rubbed his chin. "Let's give them a few more minutes." We walked back inside. Wendy turned to us with a pleading expression. "Can you boys go out and see if they're alright? I know it's long after closing, but I'm worried. I think something happened." We both nodded. She went inside and reappeared a few moments later with 2 flashlights. "Just go look around for 10 or 20 minutes. If you can't find them by then, we'll call the police." We crossed the road and stepped into the trees. The snow swirled all around us, dancing in the beams of our flashlights. Though we were bundled up and had boots, the cold still permeated and chilled our bones. The drifts seemed impassable, even though they were only 1 or 2 feet tall at the most. Dolan's voice piped up over the wind as it whistled thinly among the branches. "Those people picked a terrible time to get a tree." Then, as if in afterthought, he added, "I hope they're okay. Liam too." I nodded my agreement, but I don't think he noticed. We had been searching for about 5 minutes before I realized that we didn't know the couple's names. I expressed this concern with Dolan, who just said, "Well, Liam's with them. We can just call his name and we'll find them too." A few more minutes passed and we weren't any closer than when we started. We got no response, no matter how loud we yelled. This is going nowhere. If we have any hope of finding them at all, we should split up. Dolan nodded. "Okay, I'll head off in this direction." He pointed his flashlight down a long row. "And you can go that way." He pointed in the opposite direction. I couldn't think of a better plan, so I agreed. "We'll look for 15 minutes. If we can't find them, I'll call you and we'll head back to the house together." And with that, I was alone among the trees. For the next 10 minutes, I wandered through the snow, calling Liam's name and swatting branches out of my face. The trees were only about 6 or 7 feet tall, but they seemed to tower over me in the darkness. I still bumped into one occasionally and let out a yelp of surprise. It was around then that the sheer hopelessness of the situation came to me. 6 acres is a lot of ground to be searching for just 2 people. This was insane. I knew Wendy was worried, but it was impossible for us to even begin to consider finding them at all. I hung my face in my hands, feeling the cool ice that was forming on them. I didn't want to give up yet. Liam was my friend and the couple had seemed like nice people. If there had been an accident, I wanted to help, but at the same time, on the last act of desperation, I charged forward a few feet in the snow, cupped my hands over my mouth, and yelled, "Liam!" as loud as I could. My voice echoed down the aisles of trees, dying away in the blowing snow and wind. That was the final straw. I turned around to start my hike back to the house, when a light suddenly winked on about 15 feet down the road to my right. I breathed a sigh of relief and began walking towards the brightness as it swung lazily, catching snowflakes as it went. "Jesus, Liam, where did you guys go? I thought..." I called out, picking up my pace as I got closer. Right when I was about 10 feet away, the light blinked off, leaving me in darkness again. I cursed under my breath and brought out my flashlight, turning it on and pointing it in the direction that I had seen the beam. "Did your batteries go out? Come on, let's go back to the house." I reached the spot where the light had come from and turned, expecting to see Liam and the couple, perhaps one of them with some sort of explanation as to what was taking them so long. Instead, I saw nothing but an undisturbed pile of snow. I balked, taking a few steps back and shining my light around the 2 trees. There wasn't as much as a footprint to be seen. "Liam?" I called out again, but received no reply, much like I had failed to receive the first time. I realized something then. The lights hadn't looked like it belonged to a flashlight. It was too centralized, casting just a circle of light instead of a beam, almost as if it was a torch of some kind. A movement somewhere in the darkness to my left suddenly caught my attention. I barely had time to turn and look as a dark figure slipped between two trees, rustling them slightly and causing the snow on the branches to fall onto the drifts below. "Liam?" I called, although quieter this time. I walked a few steps forward to the gaps in the trees, keeping my light trained forward. It was about 20 feet or so in front of me. Unlike the previous time, I received a sudden and unexpected response. A deep growl seemed to come from all directions around me, despite the fact whoever was ahead of me was clearly just that. I stopped dead in my tracks as I noticed something. The figure in the tree moved, but not at my level. I saw a head rise up just from below the treetop, no discernible features present in the darkness. It was still rising higher than the trees around it when I turned and fled in the opposite direction. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to get back to the house so Wendy could call the police to find Liam and the couple, and we could all have a good laugh about it. I ran forward as far as I could and cut left in the direction I thought everything was. I looked back for just a moment to see if anything was following me. With a loud crash, I ran directly into the trunk of a tree that I had failed to notice coming up in the darkness ahead. Stars swam in my vision, and I stumbled, tripping over a root and falling into the snow. I laid there for a few moments, dazed. Groaning, I rolled over to the lights and came face to face with a bloody visage peering out at me from a large drift. I screamed, scrambling to my feet and throwing snow around as I dug for my flashlight. Finding it, I flicked it back on and pointed the beam. Though she was barely recognizable from the blood that covered her face, I realized it was the body of the young woman half buried beneath one of the trees. Her blue eyes were wide open, terror and fear in them. I dug up a small portion of the powder that covered her and nearly cried out. Her throat had been ripped out, the blood already starting to freeze under the chill. Her left arm was half gone, ripped and missing below the elbow. I didn't want to see the rest of her. I put my hand over my mouth to keep myself from vomiting. Oh my god, this was really happening. I needed to get back to the house and call the police. Who could have done this? I tried to catch the lights from the house shining over the treetops, but I didn't see anything. The snow was driving too hard for me to figure out what direction I was going. I'd just have to trust my instinct. I hastily recovered the body in the snow and tried to memorize where it was. As I headed off, I made a mental note to say a prayer for the woman whose name I didn't even know. Even though I had walked only about a half a mile into the property, it felt like 5 or 6. The snow seemed to get higher and more impassable with every step I took. As though I was getting closer to the house, I began to notice that some of the clouds were sweeping across the sky, disappearing over the woods behind the fence that marked where the Jackson's tree ended, and the forest began. The stars began to come out one by one, appearing from behind the clouds like diamonds. And then, all at once, the moon came out from behind a large gray blanket, as full and bright as I had ever seen it. The silvery lights it casted illuminated the snow below me, causing it to almost sparkle in the air night. I suddenly became aware of a low, visceral sound coming from somewhere ahead of me. Panicking, I frantically dug in my pockets for anything that could be considered a weapon. The best I could come up with was a flashlight I already held in my hand, so I held it above my head and began to move forward again. The sound became more defined as I approached it. It was a low, gurgling moan. Just as I stepped between two trees and into an open row, I saw the source of it. Dolan was stumbling along the path, grasping his hands to his stomach. Blood welled between his lips and dripped down his face. Judging by the trail he was leaving, he had come from the right. "Dolan!" I yelled, racing forward and putting my hands on his shoulders. "Oh my god, man. What the hell happened to you?" He looked up at me and attempted to speak, but only managed to cough out a thick, red sludge that dripped onto the snow at our feet. "We need to get you out of here," I cried, putting my arm around him and dragging him quickly in the direction I had been heading. He groaned and pawed a hand at the air, as if wanting me to see something. I turned just as we were about to head back into the trees. I recognized the icy stream that ran along the northeastern section of the farm. The shards of ice shone moonlight, carrying a bare thickle of water as it flowed towards the pond near the easternmost point. There, near the bank, I saw something. A massive creature was hunched near the slope that led down into the bank, occasionally dipping its head down. I saw bits and droplets of something fly from its muzzle every time it lifted it up to the night sky to snap something down. Yellow eyes burned deeply in the sockets, and I saw a clawed hand swipe down every now and again and tear off another chunk of whatever it was feeding on. With a loud rip, a portion of the thing's meal came off. It eagerly bit and snapped into it before suddenly throwing it over its shoulder, sailing through the air before coming to a messy landing about 10 feet away from us. I recognized the bloody pulp of the young man's head immediately. Dolan groaned again and stumbled against a nearby tree before coming to a rest at its base. "Man, you can't sit down. We have to," I began to say, but was cut short when he lifted his hand again, pointing at something just past the stream. Looking up, I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. A procession of 8 or 9 people were walking along the fence just beyond, one after the other. All of them seemed to be dressed in dark robes and holding torches, illuminating the way as they walked. They passed right by the feasting creature as if it wasn't there at all, before disappearing behind a line of trees. I didn't even have time to process what was happening before the chewing and slurping noises ceased. The thing suddenly turned its head to the left, and I got my first good look at it. A massive wolf's head sat atop a hairy, vaguely man-shaped form. Long claws at least a foot in length, speared from all 2 human fingers. Its fangs glinted in the wintry moonlight, slobber and blood dripping from its gaping maw. I didn't think it would ever stop as it rose its full height. From where I was, it had to be at least 9 feet tall. It lifted its snout to the sky and let out a long, ear-splitting howl before snapping back down and facing towards us. Dolan gave a strangled cry, and I almost did the same. The thing howled before it got to its hands, and started loping towards us at a speed that didn't seem scientifically possible. I jumped up, heaved Dolan to his feet, and began stumbling through the snow in the opposite direction. We heard drifts of snow being plowed as the creature ambled through them, snarls growing louder as it approached. We just reached the next row as the wolf tore through the trees behind us, reducing them to splinters. Dolan screamed, and I was jerked to the side as the claws speared through his leg. With a mighty heave, the wolf threw him far to the left. I instantly heard him crashing down through the rows as I myself was suddenly swatted to the side. The world rolled around me, trees and branches and the night sky jetting past my vision before I hit something with a loud crack. My vision swam and I sank to the snowy ground, warm blood starting to run down my forehead. The last thing I saw before I sunk into the darkness was the wolf crashing through the trees ahead. "Blake!" I groaned, my vision blurring. Someone was shaking my shoulder. I limply swatted at the hand and slumped back down, but they came around my shoulders and shook me harder. "Blake, listen to me. There's something out there." My eyes finally cleared, and I looked up to see Liam shaking me as hard as he could. Sweat rolled down his brow, and he looked terrified. There was a large rip in his coat, and I saw an icy slush of blood and melted snow covering his right arm. "Liam?" I mumbled, getting to my feet. "What's going?" It all suddenly came rushing back to me. "Have you seen it too?" I asked, stumbling back a few steps. Liam nodded gravely. "Yeah, that couple and I had been walking for like 5 minutes when it came and attacked us. I tried to cut it with my saw, but it tossed me aside and went after them. When I woke up again, they were gone. I've been going around trying to find you guys. I reiterated what had happened with me and Dolan. Liam groaned. We're screwed. We began walking north, being as quiet as possible. The moon overhead was still bright, lighting the way as we went. We tried to slip through the trees that didn't have much snow on them. Whenever it fell off the branches and landed in the drifts, we winced and braced ourselves for that thing to come out at any moment. After what seemed like hours, I caught sight of bright lights peeking through the branches. The trees started thinning out and the ground became more even. It's the house, Liam cried, running forward. We need to call the police. We need to get an ambulance. He was babbling now, not bothering to be quiet anymore. Oh my god, I want to get out of here. I tried shushing him as we stepped through the final row of trees and onto the road that separated them and the house. Dan, Liam called faintly as we walked up the porch. Windy? The first thing we noticed was that the front door was missing. It lay smashed in the front hall, twisted out of shape and spread over a sea of broken glass. Oh no, I moaned. We stepped through the threshold and into the house. Have yourself a merry little Christmas was floating faintly through the archway. We stopped just short of it and peeked inside. A large pool of blood had seeped from the direction of the dining room and stained the hardwood floor. The kitchen looked like a tornado had gone through it. Utensils and broken glass littered the floor and counters. The oven doors had been smashed, and the island had several large cracks in it. I saw a blood-stained hand peeking out from behind it. Beyond that, just out of our line of sight, I saw Dan's baseball hat, matted and soaked with blood. Liam gave a strangled cry and turned, clattering through the front hall and out into the yard. Clutching my hand to my mouth, I did the same, although much quieter. He was leaning against his car, breathing heavily, tears and sweat pouring down his face. I tried to take control of the situation. Let's get out of here. We can take my car. You can call the police on your phone and send them over. They'll take care of. But the rest of my sentence was cut off by a low growl. I looked over Liam's shoulder. Rising up from the opposite side of the car, fangs bared in a snarl, was the wolf. Blood matted its fur and dripped from its muzzle, pattering onto the snow like raindrops. Something glinted in its mouth, and I noticed Wendy's wedding ring was hooked on one of the teeth. Liam, I started to say, but it was too late. With a loud roar, the thing dove over the car and stabbed him with its claws. He gave a strangled cry and went down like a sack of bricks. It jumped on top of him and began to feast immediately. I fled in the opposite direction, heading towards my car. I frantically dug in my pockets for the keys and took them out. I had just put my hand on the handle when a thought crossed over my mind. Dolan. I looked back towards the trees. He couldn't be more than an acre or so inside the farm. I had to try and go get him. I had already seen 5 people die. I couldn't let another one. Making sure the wolf was still occupied, I darted into the trees, running as fast as I could. The branches swatted me as I passed, heading in the direction I thought the 2 of us had been. I tried to rationalize the situation. Dolan can't be too injured, I thought. Once I find him, we'll find a spot to lie low. We'll wait till morning and sneak our way to the cars. Everything will be alright. Even in my head, it sounded impossible. But I had to try. A few minutes later, I'd almost resigned myself to the fact that I'd never be able to find him in time, before I broke out into a large path between the trees and I saw it. I was only about 15 feet away from the large, frozen pond that the stream fed into. Dolan was slumped by the bank. It didn't look like he was moving. I resisted the urge to call out his name and raced forward, skidding to a halt and kneeling in front of him. Dolan, come on, wake up. We've got to get out of here. He stirred softly and began to sit up. Blake, what was that thing? It's... The tree line behind us exploded in a shower of wood fragments and branches. I barely had time to turn around when the wolf's claws dug into me again, tossing and sending me flying forward. I sailed through the air and landed with a hard bang on the frozen surface of the pond. Stars danced in front of my eyes, and I turned to see the wolf rising over Dolan, claws raised in the air, ready to deliver a killing slash. He moaned feebly and was trying to crawl away. I looked around at the shreds of ice and snow that lay beside me. An idea suddenly clicked in my head. I snatched up one of the shards of ice. Winding my hand back as far as it could go, I flung it in the wolf's direction. It struck it squarely in the snout and it faltered, claws lowering for a moment. I lobbed more snow and ice at the thing, yelling "hey" as loud as I could. The wolf turned in my direction and snarled. I dropped the shard of ice I had been holding and stood there, waiting. With a loud roar, the thing sprang up and dove through the air towards me, arcing above my head with its claws raised up for a killing blow. At the last moment, I dove to the right and skidded across the ice, heading for the other side of the pond. The wolf landed and cracked the frozen water with a loud sound that echoed through the trees like shattering glass. It broke through and fell into the freezing water with a tremendous splash. I made it to the other side and collapsed in the snow. I heard the thing howl again and saw its large claws batting at the sides of slick ice, but it was too slippery. Its struggles grew weaker, and a few minutes later, it disappeared below the surface without a sound. I got to my feet again and began making my way towards Dolan, but before I could reach him, a sudden movement caught my attention. As I watched, the cloaked figures we had seen earlier began emerging from the trees, now missing their torches. Each had something silver around their necks that hung down and glinted in the moonlight. The hoods were pulled down too far in front of their faces to make out any details. They came to a rest at the opposite side of the pond and stood there, watching us. Then, just as quickly as they had come, they began rapidly walking towards Dolan. "What are you doing?" I cried, not quite sure what was going on. I watched as they reached him, took him up in their arms, and began walking back towards the tree line. I ran forward, shouting. Catching them just as they started disappearing, I heard Dolan cry out weakly and saw him fidget in their arms. I reached out and grabbed one of the cloaked figures by the shoulder. With sudden speed, a knife flashed in their hand and plunged into my arm. I screamed and backed up, tripping and falling against the ground. There was sudden, sharp burst of pain as my head collided with a rock. Moments before, I blacked out. I saw the last of the figures slip out of sight. I awoke in the back of an ambulance a few hours later. Apparently someone had heard a commotion on the farm and called the cops. They had found me on the edge of the pond, alone. In the hospital, the police tried to question me about the events of the night. I knew telling them what had really happened would result in institutionalization, so I made up a story about being knocked out when I went to help the customers find their trees. "That makes you the only survivor, boy," one of them said. "You're pretty lucky. 6 fatalities and you were fortunate enough to live." I blinked in confusion. "What do you mean 6? They told me they had found the body of a man beneath the ice in the pond. It appeared he had fallen through and frozen to death. They showed me his picture. I had no idea who he was. When I asked about Dolan, they said they hadn't recovered his body anywhere on the farm. They also searched the forest behind the farm. They found some sort of strange ritual site in a clearing, with a stone table and frayed ropes at the 4 corners. There were deep scratches in the rock, as if something had been tied to it and desperately wanted to be let free. It also appeared that it had been vacated very recently, perhaps even just following the massacre. All attempts to figure out what any of it meant went nowhere. I missed the holidays with my family. I was still in the hospital. They brought me Christmas dinner and presents, but I really wasn't in the festive mood. Luckily, I was able to get out just in time to head back to college. The incident became sort of a legend in my town. The Jacksons had been upstanding members of the community, and everyone mourned their deaths. The unknown couple, it turned out that they were from a town or so over, and Liam received their own candlelight vigils as well. I returned home the next Christmas to my town thrown into chaos. Numerous pets and animals had been found slaughtered in the night, scattered across the fields and lawns. A local boy had gone missing a few weeks prior. He had yet to be found. One night, I got up to get a drink of water. As I passed the kitchen window, movement near the tree line caught my attention. I looked up. A hooded figure just stood inside the canopy, snow and ice crusting its billowing robes. I finally recognized the thing around its neck. It was an intricate silver carving of a wolf. And there, in the trees just beyond, I could barely make out a pair of glowing yellow eyes. Though they were wild and had a deep rage in them, I recognized who they belonged to immediately. The glass fell from my hands and shattered against the kitchen floor. I watched through the falling snow as the two sunk back into the shadows, swallowed up by the darkness of the trees.